The USS Enterprise D glided through the ink-black void of space, its saucer section reflecting distant starlight as it patrolled the edge of the neutral zone. Captain Jean-Luc Picard sat in his command chair, reviewing reports from the Stellar Cartography Department when the bridge erupted in chaos. "Captain!" Lieutenant Worf's voice carried the edge of a warrior sensing battle. "Massive subspace distortion off the port bow, configuration unknown." Picard rose smoothly, his command presence filling the bridge. On screen, the view screen shimmered, revealing what looked like reality tearing itself apart. A wound in space pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist. Violent purples bleeding into impossible golds, energies that made the sensors scream in protest. The distortion writhed like a living thing, contracting and expanding with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat. "Analysis, Mr. Data?" Picard's tone remained calm, but his eyes narrowed. The android's fingers danced across his console with inhuman precision. "Fascinating, Captain. The phenomenon exhibits characteristics of both a temporal rift and a dimensional cascade. Subspace layers are folding into each other in a manner that violates known physics. There appears to be..." Data paused, his head tilting in that peculiar way that indicated genuine confusion. Something attempting to exit the aperture. Something. Picard moved closer to the screen. "I cannot identify the mass signature. It reads as biological, technological, and..." Data's golden eyes flickered. "Mythological. That last classification should not be possible." The rift convulsed. A shockwave of exotic energy rippled outward, washing over the Enterprise's shields like a tsunami of impossible physics. The lights flickered, consoles sparked, and then, ejected from the wound in space like a bullet from a gun, came a figure wreathed in frost and flame. Kratos tumbled through the void, his gray ashen skin stark against the darkness. The Leviathan axe gleamed in his right hand, trailing particles of absolute cold. The blades of chaos hung from his hip, their chains clinking silently in vacuum. His eyes, those eyes that had witnessed the death of Olympus, the twilight of Asgard, opened with predatory awareness. He saw the Enterprise, a vessel of metal and light, impossibly large, floating in an emptiness unlike any he had known. No Bifrost, no world tree, just cold, infinite nothing and distant points of light. The rift sealed behind him with a sound that transcended hearing, a fundamental wrongness that made every crew member on the bridge wince. Kratos began to drift, his momentum carrying him toward the Enterprise's hull. "Sir, the entity is on a collision course with our port nacelle," the helmsman reported. "Tractor beam," Picard ordered immediately. "Bring him into Cargo Bay 2, and someone get a medical team down there." The blue beam of the tractor locked onto Kratos, and the Spartan's eyes narrowed. He felt the invisible force gripping him, pulling him toward the strange vessel. His fingers tightened on the axe. Another manipulation, another power trying to control him. In the cargo bay, the transporter-like hum of the tractor beam materialized Kratos onto the deck plating. He landed in a crouch, battle-ready, scanning his surroundings with centuries of combat instinct. The room was massive, filled with containers marked with symbols he didn't recognize. Lights embedded in the ceiling provided illumination without flame or torch. The walls hummed with barely perceptible energy. The doors hissed open, another impossibility, metal parting without visible mechanism. Lieutenant Worf entered first, flanked by 4 security officers in gold-trimmed uniforms. They carried strange devices that looked like tools, not weapons. Worf's ridged Klingon features studied Kratos, with the gaze of one warrior measuring another. "I am Lieutenant Worf of the USS Enterprise," the Klingon said, his voice carrying the ceremonial weight of first contact protocol. You are safe here. We mean you no harm." Kratos rose to his full height, and even battle-hardened Worf felt the primal part of his brain scream warnings. This was no random survivor. This was an apex predator evaluating prey. "Safe," Kratos repeated, his voice like grinding stone. The word tasted foreign in his mouth. He'd heard it before, from gods who claimed benevolence while sharpening their chains. His eyes fixed on the devices in the security officer's hands. "Those are weapons." "Type 2 phasers," Worf confirmed, not bothering to lie. He respected that much. "Set to stun. Standard procedure for unknown contacts." "Unknown?" A bitter edge crept into Kratos' tone. "I am Kratos, Ghost of Sparta, god of war." He let the titles hang in the air, watching for recognition, for fear, for the inevitable moment when these new gods revealed their true nature. But Worf's expression showed only confusion, and behind him, one of the security officers whispered into a communicator. The Klingon took a careful step forward. "We are not familiar with Sparta. What world do you hail from?" Before Kratos could answer, Captain Picard's voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the bay. "Mr. Worf, I'm monitoring from the bridge. Our guest has survived exposure to hard vacuum and exhibits energy readings that suggest he should not exist according to known biology. I think it's time we had a conversation." Kratos' hand shifted on the axe, and frost began to creep across the deck plating beneath his feet. Another voice from the sky, another authority assuming command. The gods never changed, no matter what form they took. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. Worf noticed the temperature drop, saw the way reality itself seemed to recoil from the weapon in Kratos' hand. His warrior instincts, honed through countless battles, told him that the phasers his team carried would be inadequate. This being had survived the void. He carried weapons that defied sensors, and in his eyes burned something Worf recognized from the greatest Klingon warriors, the absolute certainty that death held no dominion over him. "Will you speak with our captain?" Worf asked, and notably, he didn't frame it as an order. Kratos studied the Klingon for a long moment. Then his gaze lifted to the ceiling, to the invisible speaker, to the hidden god calling itself Captain. "I will hear what this Picard has to say," Kratos growled, "but I make no promises beyond that." In his grip, the Leviathan axe pulsed with Arctic power, and somewhere deep in the Enterprise's systems, sensors screamed warnings that there was something aboard that shouldn't exist. Something that made the ship's reality-based instruments question their own readings. The Ghost of Sparta had entered the final frontier, and the universe would never be the same. The observation lounge adjacent to the bridge had hosted countless first contact scenarios. Dignified exchanges with alien ambassadors, tense negotiations with Romulan commanders, philosophical debates with beings of pure energy. But none of those prepared the Enterprise crew for Kratos. The Spartan stood near the viewport, refusing the offered chair. His eyes tracked the stars sliding past, searching for constellations he knew, finding none. The Leviathan axe remained in his hand, and 4 security officers maintained positions around the room's perimeter, their phasers conspicuously holstered but within reach. Worf stood near the door, arms crossed, his tactical mind cataloging every micro-movement the warrior made. Captain Picard entered with Data and Counselor Deanna Troi, his diplomatic mask firmly in place. He changed into his dress uniform, a calculated choice to emphasize ceremony and respect. The doors whispered shut behind them. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise." He extended his hand in the universal gesture of peaceful greeting. "On behalf of the United Federation of Planets, Welcome aboard." Kratos stared at the offered hand for a long moment. The last time someone had offered him welcome and hospitality, it had been Zeus, moments before attempting to crush him beneath Olympus itself. Still, he understood the gesture's intent. He clasped Picard's forearm in the warrior's grip, and the captain's eyes widened slightly at the crushing strength barely restrained. "You lead this vessel?" Kratos asked, releasing the grip before bones fractured. "I do." Picard gestured to the chairs around the conference table. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." "I will stand." Kratos turned back to the viewport. "Where am I? This is not Midgard. Not any realm I know." Counselor Troy's empathic senses recoiled from the tsunami of barely contained emotion radiating from Kratos. Rage, yes, but also bone-deep exhaustion, grief worn like armor, and underneath it all, a desperate need to protect something or someone she couldn't identify. "Captain," she said softly, "he's experiencing significant disorientation, and he's... Gods, the pain." Kratos' head turned slightly, those merciless eyes fixing on the Betazoid. "You sense emotions." It wasn't a question. "Another gift from the gods, another chain around your neck. My sympathies." Troy blinked, taken aback. "It's not a curse. It's part of who I am. For now." Kratos' tone carried the weight of experience. "Until they decide it serves them better in someone else." Data stepped forward, his positronic brain processing Kratos' biometric data in real time. "Fascinating. Your cellular structure exhibits properties consistent with divinity myths from Earth's ancient civilizations, yet you are clearly corporeal. The energy signature surrounding your weapons suggests localized violation of thermodynamic laws. May I inquire as to your origin?" "Earth." Kratos turned, fully now, and something in his expression softened microscopically. "Greece, Sparta. Though it seems I am very far from home." Picard exchanged glances with Data. "Greece, Sparta." His mind raced through historical databases. "Mr. Data, what can you tell us about..." Sparta was a prominent city-state in ancient Greece, circa 900 to 192 BCE, Data recited. A militaristic society renowned for martial prowess and austere living conditions. However, Captain, our guest claims titles that align more closely with Greek mythology than history. God of War specifically references Ares in the Greek pantheon, though. "I was not born a god," Kratos interrupted, his voice carrying a bitter edge. "That curse was placed upon me after I killed the previous Ares. Before that, I was simply a warrior, a man." His fingers tightened on the axe, though that was lifetimes ago. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Frost began creeping across the viewport's edge. "You're saying you killed a god?" Worf's tone carried skepticism, but also interest. "In honorable combat?" There was nothing honorable about it. Kratos met the Klingon's gaze. "But yes, Ares fell by my hand, as did Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Helios, Hermes, Hera." He paused. "Heimdall, Baldur, Magni and Modi, Thor." Another pause, heavier. "Odin." The names fell like hammer blows. Picard's diplomatic composure cracked slightly. "You're claiming to have killed multiple deities from both Greek and Norse mythology?" "Not claiming." Kratos turned back to the stars. "Stating fact, they called themselves gods. They demanded worship. They treated mortals as playthings." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "So I killed them. Every pantheon that stood in my way, I tore down. Olympus burns. Asgard lies in ruins. The age of gods is over in my world." Troy's face had gone pale. The emotions rolling off Kratos were apocalyptic, genuine, terrible truth, backed by the weight of divine genocide. Captain. He believes every word he's saying, and I think it's true." Data's eyes flickered rapidly, processing. "Captain, if we accept the premise that Kratos originates from a parallel dimension where Earth's mythological beings were real, his appearance through the subspace anomaly becomes more explicable. The exotic energy readings could represent literal divine essence attempting to exist in our quantum reality." "A dimension where gods were real," Picard repeated slowly. He'd encountered omnipotent beings before, Q, the Daud, the Organians, but a human who'd systematically murdered entire pantheons. "Mr. Kratos, why did you kill them?" For the first time, something other than controlled fury crossed the Spartan's face. Pain. Ancient, soul-deep pain. "Because they took everything from me. My humanity, my family, my choice." He looked down at his ash-covered hands. "The gods made me a monster to serve their purposes, then discarded me when I was no longer useful. So I showed them what monsters can do when they stop obeying." The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of the Enterprise's systems. Even Worf, raised in a warrior culture that celebrated honorable death in battle, seemed unsettled by the casual enormity of Kratos' admission. Picard approached the viewport, standing beside Kratos, but maintaining respectful distance. "In our universe, Earth's gods were never real. They were stories our ancestors created to explain a cosmos they didn't yet understand. We've moved beyond mythology into an age of reason, of science, of cooperation between species." How naive. Kratos' tone wasn't mocking. It was genuinely pitying. "You've built your paradise on the assumption that power won't corrupt, that those with authority won't abuse it, that ideals can survive contact with reality." He glanced at Picard. "I thought that once, before Olympus, before I learned what gods really are." "The Federation isn't perfect," Picard admitted, "but we strive for something better than our base nature. We choose diplomacy over violence, cooperation over conquest. We believe in the fundamental dignity of all sentient beings." Pretty words. Kratos turned to face the captain fully. Zeus spoke pretty words too. Odin claimed wisdom and justice. They all promised paradise. His eyes burned with the memory of every betrayal. "What will you do, Captain, when I refuse to obey your Federation's laws? When I choose my own path rather than submit to your authority? Will your pretty words turn to chains then?" Worf's hand drifted toward his phaser. The security officers tensed. But Picard held up a restraining hand, his eyes never leaving Kratos' face. "We are not gods, Mr. Kratos. We are explorers, diplomats, peacekeepers. We have laws, yes, but they exist to protect freedom, not suppress it." Picard's voice carried absolute conviction. "And regardless of your past, you are a living being in distress, far from home. Our first duty is to help you, not imprison you." Kratos studied the captain for a long moment. He'd heard similar words before, always layered with hidden agendas, secret prices to be paid. But something in Picard's eyes, a genuine belief in the ideals he spoke, gave the Spartan pause. This was either the most skilled manipulator he'd ever encountered, or this universe's gods wore different faces and spoke different philosophies. "Then help me return to my world," Kratos said flatly. I left someone behind. I need to go back." Data's head tilted. The subspace rift has collapsed. Recreating such a phenomenon would require energy outputs beyond our current capabilities. However, we may be able to... The red alert klaxon screamed through the ship. The lighting shifted to crimson as Worf's console in the adjacent bridge lit up with tactical data. The Klingon's expression hardened. "Captain, 3 Romulan warbirds decloaking off the starboard bow. They're hailing us. Picard's jaw tightened. The neutral zone. Of course, the Romulans had been monitoring. They'd seen the anomaly, detected the exotic energy readings, and now they wanted what had emerged from it. On screen, Picard ordered, moving toward the bridge with Data and Troi following. Kratos remained in the observation lounge, watching through the viewport as 3 massive vessels shimmered into existence, their predatory hull designs radiating obvious hostile intent. Their weapons ports glowed with building charge. Worf stayed behind, his warrior's instinct recognizing that leaving this being unsupervised during a confrontation would be foolish. The Romulans are an empire built on conquest and deception, he explained. They've been our enemies for decades. Then we have something in common, Kratos replied, watching the warships position themselves in attack formation. I know how to deal with empires. On the bridge view screen, a Romulan commander appeared, sharp features, cold eyes, the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Captain Picard, you will surrender the entity that emerged from the anomaly. It is a matter of galactic security that such power not remain in Federation hands. Through the observation lounge window, Kratos watched Picard's reflection in the view screen. Watched how the captain straightened, how his voice carried diplomatic steel wrapped in velvet reason. Commander, the individual who arrived through the anomaly is a sapient being, not property to be surrendered. He is under Federation protection as a refugee. Unacceptable. Our scans indicate he carries weapons technology that violates known physics. Such threats cannot be allowed. The transmission cut off as the lead warbird fired a warning shot across the Enterprise's bow. Shields flared blue against the disruptor blast. Worf's hands moved to his weapons console on the bridge. Shields holding. Weapons charged and ready, Captain. Kratos felt the ship shudder slightly from the impact. He'd felt similar tremors when gods prepared their attacks, the gathering of power before the storm. These Romulans, whoever they were, intended to take him by force, just like the gods always did. His grip on the Leviathan axe tightened, and Worf watched as the weapon began to emit a low, crystalline hum. The air around Kratos shimmered with cold. "What are you doing?" the Klingon asked. "Preparing," Kratos answered simply. "They want a demonstration of power? I've given that speech before." And deep in the Enterprise's hull, sensors screamed warnings that something was building, an energy signature that read as simultaneously absolute zero and burning plasma, an impossibility that made the ship's computers question their own existence. The Ghost of Sparta had been patient long enough. Captain Picard stood on the bridge, facing the Romulan commander's cold ultimatum with a diplomatic resolve that had diffused countless crises. But this situation was different. The Romulans weren't posturing. Their weapons were hot, their formation aggressive, and their demand non-negotiable. "Commander, I urge you to reconsider," Picard said, his voice measured but firm. "Firing upon a Federation starship in the neutral zone constitutes an act of war. Then consider it an act of necessity." The Romulan's expression remained impassive. "You have 30 seconds to lower your shields and transport the entity to our lead vessel. After that, we will take him by force." The transmission ended. On the tactical display, all 3 Warbirds' weapon systems reached full charge. "Captain," Worf reported from tactical, "they are targeting our shield generators. They intend to disable us, not destroy." "They want him alive," Riker observed from his position at Picard's side. "Whatever he is, they think he's worth risking war over." Data turned from his console. "Sir, I am detecting a significant energy buildup in the observation lounge. The exotic matter signature surrounding Kratos has increased exponentially. Temperature readings are dropping toward absolute zero in localized space, while simultaneously, he paused, his positronic brain struggling with contradictory data. Rising toward stellar core temperatures. This should not be physically possible. Picard's eyes widened. Get Worf out of there. Now. But it was already too late. In the observation lounge, Kratos had heard enough. Another empire demanding his surrender. Another authority assuming it could control him through superior numbers and firepower. The Romulans were no different than the Olympians, who'd thought their godhood made them untouchable, or the Aesir who'd believed their realm eternal. They would learn the same lesson. You should leave, Kratos told Worf, his voice carrying an ominous calm that the Klingon recognized from moments before battle turned to slaughter. Kratos, don't, Worf began, but the Spartan was already moving. Kratos drove the Leviathan axe into the observation lounge floor. The deck plating screamed as absolute zero temperatures erupted from the point of impact, flash freezing a 10-meter radius. Frost exploded across every surface, turning the viewport into a crystalline sheet of ice. The very air crystallized, falling like diamond snow. Then he ripped the blades of chaos from their hip mounting. The chains ignited with hellfire that burned without consuming oxygen, flames that existed on a fundamental level below physics. The temperature swing from Arctic to infernal in the space of seconds made the hull groan in protest. Warning klaxons shrieked throughout the ship. Bridge to observation lounge. Picard's voice carried barely controlled alarm. Mr. Kratos, stand down immediately. We can resolve this peacefully. Kratos didn't respond. He spun the Yaber blades in a pattern burned into his muscle memory through centuries of slaughter. And the chains sang their familiar song of destruction. His eyes locked on the frozen viewport, beyond which the Romulan warbirds waited. You want to see what I am? Kratos growled. Then watch. He hurled the Leviathan axe. The weapon punched through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport like it was paper. The sudden decompression should have vented the observation lounge into space. Should have killed everyone not wearing a spacesuit. But Kratos had survived the void between realms. Mere vacuum held no terror for him. Worf grabbed an emergency handhold as the atmosphere shrieked outward. Emergency force fields slammed into place, sealing the breach, but not before the axe had continued its flight into open space. The Leviathan axe spun through the void, trailing particles of impossible cold. It struck the lead Romulan warbird's shields and passed through them as if they didn't exist. On the Romulan bridge, the commander's confident sneer evaporated. What? Shields are holding. How did... The axe buried itself in the warbird's starboard nacelle. Frost erupted across the hull like a cancer, spreading at impossible speed. Entire sections of the vessel flash froze, their molecular structures shattering as temperature dropped to levels that made quantum mechanics scream. The nacelle exploded silently in the void, and the warbird lurched, trailing frozen debris. Impossible, the Romulan commander shouted. All ships, evasive. In the observation lounge, Kratos extended his hand. The Leviathan axe ripped itself free from the crippled warbird and flew back through space, smashing through the emergency force field and the frozen viewport, returning to his grip with the inevitability of fate itself. The force field reestablished. Atmosphere rushed back in. Worf stared at Kratos with a mixture of shock and something approaching awe. Kapla, the Klingon breathed. The word for success, for victory, for glory in battle. On the Enterprise bridge, every crew member had watched the tactical display in stunned silence, as a thrown melee weapon had somehow damaged a vessel protected by shields designed to withstand photon torpedoes. Explain that, Mr. Data, Riker said quietly. I cannot, sir. Data's expression approached genuine confusion. The weapon should not have penetrated their shields. It possesses no identifiable energy signature that would allow phase variance. It simply ignored the barrier. Picard's hands gripped the arms of his command chair. Hail the Romulans. Perhaps now they'll... Captain, the other 2 warbirds are breaking formation. Worf's replacement at tactical reported. They're retreating, going to warp. The damaged warbird limped after its companions, its crippled nacelle leaving a trail of frozen particles as it warped away. The Enterprise was alone again, silence settling over the bridge like snow. Picard stood, straightening, his uniform with sharp, precise movements. Counselor, you're with me. Data, maintain yellow alert, and someone get a repair team to the observation lounge. He paused. And tell them to bring winter coats. When Picard and Troy entered the observation lounge, now repressurized but still frosted with ice, they found Kratos standing exactly where he'd been before, the Leviathan axe once again at his side. Worf stood near the door, his expression unreadable but his posture radiating newfound respect. You just attacked a Romulan warbird with a hand axe, Picard said, his diplomatic mask fractured by sheer disbelief. From inside my ship, through a viewport, in the vacuum of space. They threatened to take me by force. Kratos turned to face the captain. I showed them why that was unwise. No one takes me anywhere against my will. Not anymore. You could have triggered a war. Picard's voice rose slightly, his command authority asserting itself. The Romulans will see this as an act of aggression by the Federation. Then they are fools. Kratos' tone remained maddeningly calm. I am not Federation. I follow no flag but my own. They wanted to see my power. I gave them mercy. I could have thrown the axe through their bridge, through their reactor core. I chose the nacelle. They'll survive, retreat, and tell their empire that some threats aren't worth claiming. Troy stepped forward, her empathic senses open despite the overwhelming intensity of Kratos' presence. You're not just a warrior. You've done this before. Intimidated empires into backing down. Many times. Kratos' eyes held ancient memory. Zeus and Olympus, Odin and Asgard, the Titans before them. When you've killed enough gods, the lesser powers learn to stay clear. He met Picard's gaze directly. I did not ask to come to your universe, Captain. But I will not be a prisoner here. Not by your Federation, not by their Romulans, not by anyone. I understand that you've suffered, Picard said, his tone softening slightly. And I acknowledge that your actions just now, while reckless, likely prevented bloodshed. But you are on my ship, and while you're here, I cannot have you taking unilateral military action. Then remove me from your ship. Kratos gestured to the viewport. Put me on a planet. Leave me in space. I survived the void between realms. Your vacuum holds no fear. You'd die, Troy said quietly. I've died before. Kratos' response carried such matter-of-fact certainty that she flinched. It never takes. Data's voice came through the comm system. Captain, we are receiving a priority message from Starfleet Command. They've detected the confrontation and are demanding a full report. Additionally, Klingon High Command has transmitted a request to speak with, and I quote, the warrior who strikes from distance with honor. Picard closed his eyes briefly, already anticipating the diplomatic nightmare unfolding. Acknowledge both messages. Tell them we're assessing the situation. He turned back to Kratos. You claim you want to return to your world, to someone you left behind. Very well. We'll help you. But in exchange, I need your word that you won't take aggressive action while aboard this vessel unless directly threatened. Directly threatened, Kratos repeated. By your definition or mine? A fair question. Picard considered. If someone attempts to restrain you, capture you, or harm you without justification, you have the right to defend yourself. But you must allow us the opportunity to resolve conflicts peacefully first. Kratos studied the captain for a long moment. He'd made deals with gods before. They always twisted words, found loopholes, turned promises into chains. But Picard spoke with the conviction of someone who genuinely believed in his ideals, naive as they were. I will not strike first without cause, Kratos finally said. But I define what constitutes cause. And if your peaceful solutions fail, I reserve the right to solve problems my way. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't even particularly reassuring. But Picard recognized it was the best he'd get from a being who'd spent lifetimes being betrayed by authority figures. Agreed, Picard said, extending his hand again. This time, Kratos took it in a proper handshake, though Picard still felt his metacarpals protest the pressure. Worf approached, his earlier wariness replaced with something approaching warrior's kinship. That was an impressive display. The Romulans will speak of this for years. Let them speak. Kratos released Picard's hand. Words are wind, only action matters. A very Klingon philosophy, Worf observed, with the faintest hint of approval. Data's voice interrupted again. Captain, I've been analyzing the recording of Kratos' attack. The Leviathan axe appears to operate on principles that predate modern physics. It doesn't interact with shields because shields are designed to stop energy and matter as we understand them. The axe is something else entirely. A conceptual weapon that exists in the space between definition. Magic, Troy said softly. We don't have magic in this universe, Picard countered. Kratos actually smiled, a cold, grim expression, devoid of humor. You do now. The observation lounge fell silent again, the implications settling over them like the frost that still clung to the walls. The Enterprise had just become host to something that shouldn't exist. A mythology made flesh, a walking violation of their universe's rules, a warrior who'd killed gods and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. And somewhere in Romulan space, a commander was composing a report that would send shockwaves through the quadrant. The Federation possesses a weapon that ignores shields, a single warrior who can cripple warbirds with thrown axes. Recommend extreme caution. But in Klingon space, another report was being filed. A warrior of unparalleled skill has been encountered. His methods honor the old ways. We must learn more. The Ghost of Sparta had announced his presence to the galaxy, and the galaxy was taking notice. The Enterprise had resumed course along the neutral zone, but the atmosphere aboard had fundamentally changed. Word of what had happened spread through the crew like wildfire. Exaggerated in some tellings, understated in others, but always carrying the same core truth. There was something aboard that could cripple Romulan warbirds with a thrown axe. Kratos had been assigned guest quarters on Deck 8, though assigned was perhaps too strong a word. Picard had offered them, and Kratos had accepted with visible reluctance, making it clear the door's lock would be meaningless if he chose to leave. The quarters were spacious by starship standards. A bedroom, living area, and a viewport that looked out onto the stars. He stood at that viewport now, the Leviathan axe leaning against the wall within arm's reach, the blades of chaos coiled at his feet. His reflection stared back at him from the transparent aluminum, ash-gray skin, the red tattoo that marked his brother's ashes, eyes that had witnessed too much death. Somewhere beyond these stars was his world. His son. Atreus would be searching for him, worried, perhaps believing his father dead again. The thought settled in Kratos' chest like a stone. He'd promised the boy he would return. He'd promised not to abandon him like the gods had abandoned everyone. The door chimed, a musical sound requesting entry. "Enter," Kratos said, not turning from the viewport. The doors slid open to reveal Data, carrying a tray with what appeared to be food and a glass of water. The android entered with precise movements, his golden eyes taking in every detail of the Spartan's posture, weapon placement, room positioning. "I thought you might require sustenance," Data said, placing the tray on the low table. "Our replicators can synthesize food from virtually any culture in our database. Though I was uncertain what would be appropriate for someone from ancient Sparta, I selected a protein-rich meal with Mediterranean seasonings that approximate—" "You're not alive," Kratos interrupted, finally turning to face the android. "Yet you move, speak, think." Data's head tilted in that distinctly inhuman gesture. "I am a Sung-type android. My positronic brain allows consciousness, or something analogous to it. Whether I am truly alive is a question that has been debated extensively. I've met constructs before." Kratos approached, studying Data with the scrutiny of someone who'd fought animated statues, bronze automatons, and the mechanical servants of Hephaestus. Hephaestus built servants of bronze and gold. Daedalus crafted wings from wax and feathers. But they were tools, clever, but tools nonetheless. You are something else. I am curious about that distinction. Data's eyes flickered with genuine interest. What makes me something else in your perception? Kratos considered the question, surprised to find himself actually thinking about it rather than dismissing the construct out of hand. The others served because they were built to serve. They had no choice in their nature. You. He gestured at Data's uniform, the communicator badge. You chose to be here, to bring me food, to ask questions. Choice makes you more than a tool. Data's expression approached something like gratitude. That is a more gracious assessment than I expected. Many beings struggle with the concept of artificial consciousness. He paused. May I ask you questions? Your existence presents numerous scientific paradoxes I find fascinating. You may ask. Kratos moved to the tray, examining the food. It looked and smelled authentic enough: roasted meat, vegetables, bread. I make no promises to answer. Understood. Data sat in one of the chairs with precise posture. You claim to have killed multiple deities. From a thermodynamic perspective, divine beings would theoretically possess energy levels approaching those of stellar bodies. Yet, you are fundamentally biological. How did you survive the energy transfer involved in such confrontations? Kratos took a bite of the meat. It was good, not replicated then, or their replicators were better than he'd assumed. I died many times. Each death made me stronger. The gods themselves made me immortal to serve them better. They gave me the tools to kill them. Ironic, Data observed. Inevitable. Kratos swallowed. Power always believes it's unassailable, gods especially. They never imagine their weapons turned against them until the blade's already in their chest. A pattern I have observed in numerous civilizations, Data agreed. Empires collapse when they grow complacent. But you're describing something more personal. You didn't overthrow divine rule for ideological reasons. You did it for revenge. Kratos' hand stilled on the bread. His jaw tightened. What makes you say that? Your emotional baseline. Data leaned forward slightly. I may not feel emotions as organics do, but I can analyze their physical manifestations with precision. When you speak of gods, your heart rate increases, your muscle tension spikes, your breathing becomes shallower. But when you mentioned someone you left behind earlier, Your physiological response suggested profound protective attachment. You are not a revolutionary. You are a father who has lost too much. The silence stretched between them. Kratos set down the food, his appetite suddenly gone. No one in this universe should have been able to read him so easily. But this construct, this being who claimed not to feel, had dissected his core motivation with surgical precision. His name is Atreus, Kratos said quietly. My son. I've already failed one family, lost a wife and daughter to the gods' manipulation. Atreus is all I have left, and I abandoned him when I pursued the threat through the collapsing realms. You did not abandon him, Data countered gently. You pursued danger to protect him from it. That is not abandonment. That is sacrifice. Sacrifice. Kratos' voice dripped with bitterness. The gods loved that word. Sacrifice for the greater good. Sacrifice for Olympus. Sacrifice for Asgard. Always someone else's sacrifice, never theirs. He looked up, meeting Data's golden eyes. I will return to him, android. No matter what your Federation says, no matter what technology you claim cannot be replicated, I will find a way. I believe you, Data said simply, and I will help you. Not because Starfleet orders it, but because it is the right thing to do. Before Kratos could respond, the ship shuddered, not violently, but enough to notice. A subtle vibration through the deck plating that made both of them tense. Data's comm badge chirped. Data to bridge. What was that? Worf's voice came through, tight with tension. We're being scanned. Deep-level sensor probes from an unknown source. The signature doesn't match any known civilization in our database. Kratos was already moving, grabbing the Leviathan axe and the blades of chaos. More enemies coming for me. Unknown, Data replied, standing smoothly. But given recent events, it is a logical assumption. He tapped his comm badge. Data and Kratos en route to bridge. They moved through the corridors at a pace that forced crew members to flatten themselves against walls. Kratos' presence was like a storm front. People felt him coming before they saw him, some primal instinct warning them that a predator walked among them. The turbolift ride to the bridge was silent, Data standing perfectly still while Kratos' hands tightened and loosened on his weapons in a rhythmic pattern. Preparation, muscle memory, the readiness of someone who'd fought in more battles than the ship's entire crew combined. The bridge doors opened. Captain Picard stood before the view screen, his expression grim. On the display, space appeared empty. But the sensor readings told a different story. Something massive was out there, invisible, studying them with technology that made the Enterprise's systems look primitive by comparison. Report, Data said, moving to his station. 3 minutes ago, we detected gravimetric distortions consistent with cloaked vessels, Riker explained from his position. But the technology is far more advanced than Romulan or Klingon stealth systems. Whatever's out there, we can't get a clear reading. Worf's console beeped urgently. Captain, the scanning beam is focusing on Deck 8, Section 12, Kratos' quarters. They're looking for him specifically. Kratos moved to stand near Picard, his eyes scanning the seemingly empty space beyond the viewport. Show yourselves, he growled, as if the hidden ships could hear him. Cowards who hide deserve no respect. As if in response to his challenge, space rippled. A ship decloaked directly ahead, but calling it a ship was inadequate. It was a vessel of impossible geometry, its hull composed of what looked like crystallized energy and folded space. The design was organic and mechanical simultaneously, suggesting a civilization that had transcended the distinction between technology and biology. My God, Troy whispered. No, Kratos said flatly. Not gods. Just another empire that thinks power makes them superior. 2 more vessels decloaked, flanking the Enterprise. The tactical displays showed their weapons, if they were weapons, charging with energies that made the sensors scream warnings about imminent warp core breach. A transmission came through, but it wasn't audio or visual. It was pure data, compressed meaning that bypassed language entirely, downloaded directly into the ship's universal translator and every crew member's mind simultaneously. Entity designated Kratos. You are an anomaly, discontinuity in quantum substrate, violation of universal constants. You must be studied, analyzed, corrected. Resistance is irrelevant. Compliance is inevitable. Prepare for extraction. The transmission ended, leaving a headache in its wake. Picard gripped the arms of his command chair, his expression hardening into something dangerous. I don't know who you are, the captain said into the comm, his voice carrying absolute authority. But the individual you're demanding is under Federation protection. We will not surrender him. Federation, inadequate authority, insufficient power. Entity Kratos represents threat to dimensional stability. Your objection is noted and dismissed. One of the ships fired. But it wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. A beam of twisted space-time lanced out, striking the Enterprise's shields and passing through them as if they weren't there, just like Kratos' axe had passed through Romulan shields. The beam struck the hull directly above Kratos' position. Reality bent. Kratos felt it immediately. A pulling sensation, not physical, but ontological. Something was trying to unmake his existence, to edit him out of this universe like a mistake in a manuscript. His very atoms were being targeted by a force that operated on principles predating physics. The Spartan's eyes blazed with recognition and fury. No, he snarled. Not again. He'd felt this before. In the space between dimensions, in the void between realms where reality grew thin. Some power was attempting to erase him, to remove the anomaly by simply deleting it from existence. Kratos planted his feet and pushed back. Spartan rage erupted. His skin glowed with crimson energy. His tattoos blazed like molten metal. The ambient temperature on the bridge spiked as his divine essence, his godhood, earned through murder and suffering, manifested in its rawest form. The ontological deletion beam struck his rage and stopped. On the alien vessel, systems that had never encountered resistance suddenly faced the impossible. A biological entity refusing to be unmade by reality editing technology. Alarms that had no precedent began to sound. Anomaly resisting correction, increasing power to maximum. Prepare for... Kratos roared, a sound that transcended mere vocalization, carrying with it the weight of every god he'd killed, every realm he'd destroyed, every pantheon he'd toppled. It was the scream of mythology refusing to die, of legends denying their own obsolescence. The beam shattered. Feedback cascaded through the alien vessel systems. Hull sections cracked, leaking exotic energies into space. The ship lurched, its impossible geometry fracturing under the strain of having its fundamental assumptions about reality rejected by sheer force of will. On the Enterprise bridge, every crew member stared in shock as Kratos stood wreathed in power that made their eyes water to look at directly. Not because it was bright, but because it was wrong, a thing that shouldn't exist, continuing to exist through pure stubbornness. Shields at 40%, someone called out. Hull integrity compromised on decks 6 through 9. But Kratos wasn't listening. His eyes locked on the alien vessels, and in his hand, the Leviathan axe began to sing, a low, crystalline note that resonated with absolute zero itself. You want to study me? Kratos' voice carried the weight of divine wrath. Come down here and try. The alien ship's geometry shifted, their weapon systems charging to levels that would atomize the Enterprise in seconds. And Captain Picard, standing in the eye of a storm between ancient mythology and advanced technology, made a choice that would define everything that followed. "Mr. Worf," he said calmly, "drop shields." "Sir?" Worf's shock was evident. "Drop shields." Picard's eyes never left the view screen. "If they want him, let's see what happens when there's nothing between them." The shields fell, and Kratos smiled, a terrible, predatory expression that promised violence on a scale this universe had never witnessed. The hunt was on. The moment the Enterprise's shields dropped, Kratos moved. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for Picard's orders or Starfleet protocol. The alien vessels wanted him. They could have him, along with everything that entailed. "Transporter room, lock onto my position," Kratos commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge chaos with absolute authority. "Belay that," Riker shouted, but Kratos was already charging toward the turbolift. Picard's hand shot up, stopping his first officer. "Let him go." "Captain, he's going to get himself killed." "No," Picard said quietly, watching Kratos disappear into the turbolift. "I don't think he is, and I think those ships are about to learn a very old lesson about the dangers of hubris." In the turbolift, Kratos focused inward, letting the Spartan rage settle from explosive fury into cold, controlled violence. The crimson glow faded from his skin, but the power remained, coiled like a serpent waiting to strike. He'd learned long ago that rage without discipline was merely tantrum. True wrath required patience. The turbolift doors opened to reveal the transporter room. Chief O'Brien stood at the console, his hands hovering over the controls, clearly uncertain whether he should be obeying or preventing what was about to happen. "Transport me to the nearest alien vessel," Kratos ordered. O'Brien's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't just... Those ships are shielded with technology we don't understand. The transporter beam won't penetrate." Kratos approached the transporter pad, stepping onto one of the circular platforms. "Then transport me into space between us. I'll handle the rest." "You'll die in vacuum." "I've died in worse places." Kratos planted his feet, the Leviathan axe in one hand, the blades of chaos in the other. "Do it, now." O'Brien looked to the comm panel, silently pleading for orders from the bridge. After a moment, Picard's voice came through. "Energize, Chief." "Aye, sir." O'Brien's hands moved across the console with professional precision, despite his obvious reservations. "God help us all." "Gods can't help you anymore," Kratos said. "I killed them." The transporter beam took him. Space was silent, cold, and infinite. Kratos materialized in the void between the Enterprise and the lead alien vessel, his body immediately exposed to hard vacuum and cosmic radiation that would have killed any normal human in seconds. But Kratos was far from normal. He'd walked through Helheim, where reality itself froze. He'd fought in the Greek underworld, where the very air was death. He'd survived being crushed beneath mountains, drowned in rivers of blood, and torn apart by titans. Mere vacuum was an inconvenience. His lungs didn't need air, not immediately. His divine constitution allowed him to function in environments that defied biology. He had perhaps 2 minutes before even his godly resilience failed. 2 minutes to make his point. The alien vessel loomed before him, its impossible geometry shifting and reconfiguring, sensors no doubt tracking his presence with confusion. What biological entity survives unshielded space? What warrior intentionally ejects himself into the void? Kratos answered by hurling the Leviathan axe with every ounce of his divine strength. The weapon spun through vacuum, trailing frost that crystallized into impossible ice formations despite the lack of atmosphere. It struck the alien vessel's hull, and the ship's reality-bending defenses activated automatically, attempting to phase the axe into a different dimensional frequency where it couldn't cause harm. But the Leviathan axe existed outside such definitions. It was forged in myth, empowered by primordial forces that predated concepts like dimensions or frequencies. The ship's defenses might as well have been trying to logic away a hurricane. The axe buried itself in the crystallized energy hull, and absolute zero erupted across the vessel's surface. Systems that operated on principles of folded space and quantum probability suddenly encountered a simple truth. Cold stops everything: movement, energy, thought, reality itself. Sections of the alien ship flash froze, their exotic materials shattering like glass. The geometric impossibilities of its design began collapsing as the fundamental forces holding them together crystallized into stasis. On the Enterprise bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as their sensors registered temperature readings that shouldn't exist. Degrees approaching absolute zero, spreading across an alien vessel like cancer. "He's freezing it," Data said, his voice carrying uncharacteristic awe. "The weapon is somehow reducing localized entropy to levels that violate thermodynamic law." "Where is he?" Picard demanded. Worf checked his console. "Life signs detected. In open space. Approximately 50 meters from the alien vessel. Captain, he's surviving vacuum exposure." "How long?" Troy asked, her empathic senses reaching out and finding something vast and terrible. Rage without end, grief without bottom, will without breaking point. "Unknown," Data replied. "By conventional biology, he should already be dead." Back in the void, Kratos extended his hand. The Leviathan axe ripped itself free from the alien ship's hull and flew back through space, slamming into his palm with the force of a meteor strike. He caught it without flinching, his eyes already tracking the other two vessels as they maneuvered into attack positions. The ships fired, not physical weapons or energy beams, but something more esoteric. Reality itself twisted, space-time folding around Kratos in attempts to crush him, compress him, fold him into dimensions too small for matter to exist. The Spartan roared into the silence of space, and though no sound carried, the force of his defiance rippled outward as visible shockwaves. His Spartan rage erupted again, divine fury manifesting as raw power that refused to be constrained by universal laws. The reality folding attack struck his rage and unfolded, the space-time manipulation reversing violently. One of the attacking vessels was caught in its own reflected attack, its hull beginning to twist and compress under forces it had meant to inflict on Kratos. The Spartan was already moving, using the blades of chaos to propel himself through space. He swung the chains in coordinated patterns, and though there was no air to push against, the hellfire that wreathed the blades provided thrust through principles of mythological thermodynamics that modern physics would call impossible. He flew through vacuum like a missile, closing the distance to the nearest alien vessel in seconds. "He's using his weapons as propulsion." Riker's voice carried disbelief. "Impossible," someone breathed. "And yet," Data observed, "he does it." Kratos slammed into the alien vessel's hull with enough force to crater the exotic materials. His fingers found purchase in the crystallized energy matrix, and he began climbing. The blades of chaos struck the hull in rhythmic patterns. Stab, anchor, pull. Stab, anchor, pull. Each impact left molten wounds in the ship's surface as hellfire ate through matter that thought itself immune to conventional damage. Inside the vessel, beings of pure consciousness housed in quantum matrices experienced something they hadn't felt in eons: fear. Their sensors showed them truth, and their logic systems rejected a biological entity exposed to vacuum, climbing their hull with primitive melee weapons and winning. Entity resisting all conventional countermeasures, deploying exotic defenses, reality anchors disengaging, preparing for. Kratos found what he was looking for, a seam in the hull where the geometric impossibilities of the design created a natural weak point. He wedged the Leviathan axe into the seam and pulled. Divine strength, earned through the murder of pantheons, was applied to a problem of advanced engineering. And in that contest, mythology won. The hull section tore free, exposing the vessel's interior to vacuum. Atmosphere vented in explosive decompression, carrying with it fragments of technology that looked like liquid mathematics and frozen lightning. Kratos climbed inside. The interior of the alien ship was a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry. Corridors that bent in directions that shouldn't exist. Rooms that were somehow larger than the hull's external dimensions, surfaces that reflected realities that weren't there. It would have driven a normal human mad in seconds. But Kratos had walked through hell. He'd navigated the impossible architecture of Jotunheim's ruins. He'd fought in spaces where reality was merely suggestion. This was nothing new. His boots, inadequate for true space combat but sufficient for the divine constitution that protected him, touched down on a surface that might have been floor or might have been ceiling. Direction was negotiable here. Intruder alert. Entity Kratos has breached primary hull. Deploying internal defenses. Prepare for. The walls came alive. Tendrils of crystallized energy erupted from every surface, lashing toward Kratos with speeds that approached light itself. They were weapons, restraints, and reality editors simultaneously, designed to capture, contain, and correct any anomaly foolish enough to enter the ship. Kratos met them with the blades of chaos. The chains sang their song of destruction, weaving patterns burned into his muscle memory through centuries of slaughter. Each tendril that touched the blades ignited with hellfire that consumed its exotic matter structure. Each restraint that grasped for him was severed, frozen, or simply overpowered by strength that cared nothing for the laws of physics. He advanced through the ship's interior like a force of nature, unstoppable, inevitable, brutal. Corridors that tried to fold around him were frozen solid by the Leviathan axe's touch. Rooms that attempted to phase him into alternate dimensions were anchored by his sheer refusal to be moved. Defense systems that relied on probability manipulation discovered that Kratos existed outside probability. He was certainty given flesh. The beings of pure consciousness that crewed this vessel attempted communication. Entity Kratos. Cease hostilities. We seek only to understand. Your existence threatens dimensional stability. We must study you to prevent. You threatened my sanctuary. Kratos growled, his voice carrying through the ship's systems like a virus. You attempted to unmake me. You demanded my surrender. He destroyed another defensive system with casual brutality. I have heard these demands before. From Zeus, from Odin, from every god and empire that thought themselves untouchable. He reached what sensors suggested was the vessel's central chamber, a space that was somehow all places and no places simultaneously, where the ship's consciousness resided in quantum superposition. You do not understand. We are the preservers, the maintainers of dimensional integrity. Your presence in this universe creates cascading failures in quantum substrate. If you remain, realities will collapse. We seek to prevent extinction level. Then help me return to my universe. Kratos interrupted, the Leviathan axe beginning to glow with arctic fury. Or get out of my way while I find another method. Silence from the ship's consciousness. Processing, calculating, running probability matrices on outcomes, your return may not be possible. The dimensional rift that brought you here has collapsed. The energy required to recreate such phenomenon exceeds available resources by orders of magnitude. You are trapped in this reality. Kratos' fingers tightened on his weapons. Unacceptable. Objective reality is independent of acceptance. You cannot force your way through dimensional barriers through will alone. I've done it before. Kratos' voice dropped to something dangerous. I forced my way out of Hades. I climbed from the depths of Helheim. I broke the cycle of Ragnarok itself. He raised the Leviathan axe, pointing it at the shimmering consciousness before him. If this universe won't open a door home, I'll carve one myself, even if I have to tear through every reality between here and there. That would destroy countless dimensions. Trillions of lives would be. Then give me another option. The roar echoed through the ship, and for the first time, the alien consciousness experienced something beyond fear. It experienced desperation in the face of an immovable will. Analyzing alternatives, scanning quantum substrate for dimensional signature, matching your origin reality. Probability of success, 0 to 100%, but not 0. Then do it. Kratos lowered the axe slightly. Help me return home, and I leave this universe peacefully. Refuse, and I will become the threat you claim I am. The consciousness processed this ultimatum, running calculations on outcomes, weighing options with cold logic that lacked the emotional context to understand that Kratos would absolutely follow through on his promise. Compliance, but assistance, requires resources beyond our current capacity. We must return to the convergence, to the place where dimensions grow thin, where your arrival occurred. Then take me there. The Federation vessel must accompany us. Your existence is linked to their quantum signature now. Separation would destabilize your dimensional anchor. On the Enterprise bridge, Picard's comm badge chirped. Data's voice came through, barely masking his astonishment. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the alien vessel. They're requesting permission to escort us to a location they describe as the Convergence. They claim Kratos has negotiated a potential solution to his displacement. Picard sat back in his chair, a slight smile crossing his features. He boarded an alien vessel in hard vacuum, fought his way to their command center, and negotiated a treaty. All in approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes and 43 seconds, Data corrected. Mr. Worf, are they still a threat? Worf studied his console. Unknown, sir. But one of their vessels is heavily damaged, and they're no longer charging weapons. I would say they've been sufficiently motivated to cooperate. Picard's smile widened slightly. Indeed, send a response. The Enterprise will accompany them to this convergence. But tell them we're doing so as escorts, not prisoners. And someone prepare to beam Kratos back before his time in vacuum expires. As if on cue, Kratos stepped out of the hole he'd torn in the alien vessel's hull, standing on the crystallized energy surface. Behind him, the ship's systems were already beginning repairs, though the scars of his passage would remain as permanent reminders of what happened when mythology met technology. The Spartan looked across space toward the Enterprise, and though distance should have made eye contact impossible, Picard felt the weight of that gaze through the view screen. A warrior who'd killed gods had just out-negotiated beings of pure consciousness, and they were taking him home. The transporter beam retrieved Kratos from the hull of the alien vessel, materializing him in a cascade of golden light back in the Enterprise's transporter room. Chief O'Brien immediately ran a medical scan, his eyes widening at the readings. Sir, You were in hard vacuum for 7 minutes and 18 seconds, O'Brien said, his voice carrying equal parts awe and disbelief. Your oxygen saturation should be critical. You should have decompression sickness, radiation burns, your tissues should be, but they're not. Kratos stepped off the pad, rolling his shoulders as if he'd simply returned from a training exercise. Frost still clung to his armor, and the blades of chaos radiated enough heat to make the air shimmer. Where is the captain? Bridge, sir. Kratos was already moving, leaving O'Brien staring after him with the expression of a man whose understanding of biology had just been thoroughly violated. The bridge had transformed into a hub of controlled chaos. 3 view screens displayed different feeds, the damaged alien vessels repositioning into escort formation, stellar cartography data streaming across subspace coordinates, and a Starfleet admiral's face growing progressively more red as he listened to Picard's situation report. And you're telling me that you've allowed an unknown entity to negotiate independent diplomatic relations with a species we've never encountered? Admiral Nechayev's voice carried the sharp edge of someone whose career was flashing before her eyes. Captain, this is beyond irregular. This is necessary. Picard interrupted smoothly, years of diplomatic experience keeping his tone respectful but firm. The alternative was open warfare with a technologically superior force. Kratos found a peaceful solution where none seemed possible. By assaulting their vessel, by demonstrating that further aggression would be costly, Picard corrected. Admiral, with respect, these beings attempted to forcibly abduct someone under Federation protection using technology that bypassed our shields entirely. We were outmatched. Kratos equalized the situation. The turbo-lift doors opened. Kratos stepped onto the bridge, and every head turned. His arrival carried a palpable presence, not aggressive, but undeniable. The frost on his armor was already melting, forming small puddles on the deck plating. On the view screen, Admiral Nechayev's tirade stopped mid-sentence as she saw him. Is that Admiral Nechayev? May I present Kratos of Sparta? Picard said with diplomatic formality. Kratos, this is Admiral Alina Nechayev of Starfleet Command. Kratos gave the Admiral a curt nod, acknowledgement, not deference. Admiral. Nechayev studied him through the view screen, her tactical mind clearly assessing threat levels, political complications, and strategic implications simultaneously. Mr. Kratos, I understand you've just negotiated terms with an unknown alien species. Terms that apparently involve the Enterprise accompanying them to, what did they call it? The Convergence, data supplied. A location where dimensional barriers are naturally weakened. The aliens, who identify themselves as the Preservers, claim it's the most likely place to facilitate Kratos' return to his home dimension. And you trust them? Nechayev's skepticism was palpable. No, Kratos said flatly, but they fear me more than I need to trust them. Fear is more reliable than promises. An uncomfortable silence settled over the bridge. It was Counselor Troy who broke it, her voice gentle but firm. Admiral, I've been monitoring the Preservers' emotional resonance through their transmissions. Their fear is genuine, but so is their intention to help. They view Kratos as an existential threat to dimensional stability. They want him gone as much as he wants to leave. Nechayev's expression suggested she was developing a migraine. Captain Picard, I'm ordering you to proceed to Starbase 234 for a full debrief. This situation requires... Admiral. Kratos stepped forward, his presence dominating even through subspace transmission. With respect, your orders are irrelevant. I negotiated safe passage to the Convergence. The Preservers will take me there with or without this vessel. Captain Picard graciously offered to accompany me. But I do not require his permission, and I do not require yours. The bridge went silent. No one spoke to Starfleet admirals that way. Careers ended for less. Nechaev's eyes narrowed dangerously. Mr. Kratos, you are aboard a Federation starship in Federation space. That puts you under Federation jurisdiction, and that means... It means nothing. Kratos' tone wasn't hostile. It was simply stating fact. I have killed gods who claim jurisdiction over all existence. I have toppled empires that thought their laws absolute. Your Federation is impressive by mortal standards, but it holds no authority over me. He paused. However, Captain Picard has treated me with honesty and respect, so I will extend the same courtesy. I'm informing you of my intentions, not requesting permission. Riker winced. Worf's expression approached something like admiration. Data tilted his head, clearly fascinated by the diplomatic dynamics at play. Picard stepped between Kratos and the view screen, his diplomatic instincts screaming that this needed de-escalation. Admiral, I believe accompanying Kratos to the convergence serves multiple strategic interests. We'll establish first contact protocols with the Preservers, investigate a dimensional phenomenon that Starfleet Science Division will find invaluable, and potentially resolve the situation peacefully. And if it's a trap? Nechaev countered. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Romulans did. Worf interjected, his warrior's pragmatism cutting through the tension. That some threats cannot be contained conventionally. Nechaev studied the faces on the bridge. Her captain's diplomatic resolve, the Klingons' tactical assessment, the android's scientific curiosity, and most importantly, the Spartans' absolute certainty. She'd fought bureaucratic battles long enough to know when to concede ground strategically. Very well, Captain. Proceed to the convergence. But I want hourly reports, full sensor logs, and if this goes sideways, you follow my extraction orders without question. Understood. Understood, Admiral. And Mr. Kratos? Nechaev's gaze fixed on him. When you return to your dimension, if you return, I sincerely hope we never encounter you again. You're far too destabilizing for my comfort. The feeling, Kratos said without humor, is mutual. The transmission ended. Picard let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that could have gone worse. Could it? Riker asked. Before Picard could respond, Lieutenant Commander LaForge's voice came through from engineering. Captain, I'm reviewing the sensor data from Kratos' excursion. Sir, his weapons are producing energy signatures that our physics models can't explain. The axe is generating localized entropy reduction that should require power outputs equivalent to a small star. And those chain blades? They're burning without oxidizer, without fuel, without any identifiable energy source. It's like they're pulling heat from somewhere else. Data turned to Kratos. Where do your weapons derive their power? From the primordial forces they were forged to contain, Kratos replied, as if this explained everything. The Leviathan axe channels the eternal winter of Helheim. The blades of chaos channel the fire of the Greek underworld. They don't generate power, they are power given form. Mythology as physics, Data said quietly. Fascinating. Captain, Worf's voice carried sudden urgency. The Preservers are transmitting coordinates for the convergence. Distance, 37 light years. They're suggesting we proceed at maximum sustainable warp. Picard settled into his command chair, feeling the familiar weight of command decisions pressing down. They were about to venture into unknown space, guided by alien beings of dubious intent, to facilitate the departure of a warrior who'd proven capable of single-handedly threatening advanced civilizations. Just another day in Starfleet. Helm, set course for the convergence. Warp 8, engage. The Enterprise leapt to warp, the stars stretching into streaks of light. The three preserver vessels matched pace, their impossible geometry looking even more surreal in the distorted space of faster-than-light travel. 18 hours into the journey, the Enterprise's routine had adjusted to accommodate its unusual passenger. Kratos spent most of his time in the observation lounge, watching the stars blur past, occasionally responding to crew members' questions with terse but surprisingly thoughtful answers. Data visited frequently, his curiosity about the intersection of mythology and reality proving insatiable. Worf came to spar, not physically, as the risk of catastrophic injury was too high, but verbally, exchanging warrior philosophies and tactical assessments. Even Guinan, the ship's enigmatic bartender, sought him out, bringing him drinks that reminded her of ancient Mediterranean wines. "You've been here before," Kratos observed during one of Guinan's visits, studying her with the same intensity he'd used to identify gods in disguise. "Not this ship, this type of existence. Watching mortals build civilizations, make their mistakes, grow and die." Guinan's smile was mysterious. "I've been around a while, seen a lot of species rise and fall. But you're not mortal, not truly." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "What are you?" "Elorian. My people are listeners. We observe, remember, sometimes guide." She poured him a deep, crimson liquid that smelled of earth and old memories. "And you're thinking I'm another kind of god?" "Everything that lives long enough starts believing it deserves worship." Kratos took the drink but didn't sip yet. "The question is what you do with that belief." "I serve drinks and listen to problems," Guinan said simply. "Not very godlike." "No." Kratos finally tasted the wine. It was good, better than good, ancient. "It's the most honest thing I've encountered in this universe." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars streak past. Finally, Guinan spoke again. "The convergence you're traveling toward, you know it might not work, right? Dimensional travel isn't like crossing a bridge. The universe might not let you back. Then I'll force it." Kratos' tone carried absolute certainty. "I promised my son I would return. I've broken many promises in my life, Guinan, but not that one. Never that one. What if you can't force it? What if even your strength isn't enough?" Kratos set down the wine, his ash-gray hands curling into fists. "Then I will find another way, and another, and another. I will try until the universe breaks, or I do, and the universe will break first." Guinan studied him with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. "You know what makes you different from the gods you killed?" "What?" "They thought themselves untouchable. You know you're breakable. You've been broken before. But you keep getting back up." She smiled. "That's not divinity. That's humanity at its finest." Before Kratos could respond, the ship lurched, not violently, but enough to notice. A subtle shift in the warp field that made the wine ripple in its glass. Picard's voice came over the comm system. "All hands, we're approaching the convergence. Dropping to impulse in 30 seconds. Bridge crew to stations." Kratos stood, the Leviathan axe materializing in his hand, as if it had simply been waiting to be noticed. "It's time." "Good luck, Kratos," Guinan said quietly. "And when you get home, not if, tell your son you met someone who thinks he's lucky to have you." The Spartan paused at the doorway, his back to her. "Thank you, listener." Then he was gone, moving toward the bridge with purpose that suggested nothing, not distance, not dimension, not fate itself, would stand between him and his goal. The bridge view screen showed the convergence, and even the Enterprise's seasoned crew caught their breath. Space itself was wounded here. Reality bled colors that shouldn't exist, fractal patterns of light and darkness that hurt to look at directly, as if human eyes weren't designed to perceive such things. Nebula clouds swirled in impossible configurations, and through the tears in space, glimpses of other universes flickered like reflections in broken mirrors. "My God," Troy whispered. "Not gods," Kratos said, stepping onto the bridge. "Just broken barriers between worlds. I've seen worse." Data's console lit up with readings that made his positronic brain work overtime processing. "Captain, the quantum substrate here is destabilized to the point of near collapse. I'm detecting signatures from at least 17 different dimensional frequencies, all bleeding into our reality. This location represents a fundamental weakness in universal structure." "Can we facilitate Kratos' return through this?" Picard asked. "Unknown, but..." Data paused, his eyes flickering. "Captain, I'm detecting something else. Multiple warp signatures approaching at high speed. Configuration, Klingon." Worf's console blazed with tactical data. 3 Klingon Vorcha-class attack cruisers dropping out of warp. They're hailing us. Picard's jaw tightened. On screen. The view screen split, half showing the wounded reality of the convergence, half showing a Klingon captain whose scarred face suggested many battles survived. Behind him, his bridge crew moved with military precision. "Captain Picard, I am Captain Clag of the IKS Gorkon. We've been tracking your progress." His eyes shifted, finding Kratos on the Enterprise bridge. "And we've come for him." Kratos' expression didn't change, but the temperature on the bridge dropped several degrees. "The warrior who crippled a Romulan warbird with a thrown weapon," Clag continued, his voice carrying grudging respect. "Who boarded an alien vessel in hard vacuum and emerged victorious. You fight like a Klingon. No, better than a Klingon. You fight like the ancient warriors from our legends." "I fight to win," Kratos said flatly. "Nothing more." "Then prove it." Clag leaned forward, his expression intense. "The Empire has need of warriors like you. Join us. Fight alongside those who understand the value of strength and honor. We offer you glory, purpose, a place among the greatest warriors in the galaxy." "Captain Clag," Picard interjected, his diplomatic instincts screaming warnings. "Kratos is attempting to return to his home dimension. Your offer, while generous, is..." "Rejected," Kratos interrupted. "I serve no empire. Not yours, not the Federation's, not anyone's. I fight for my own reasons, on my own terms." Clag's expression hardened. "You refuse Klingon hospitality? You reject the honor we offer?" "I reject all chains, no matter how much glory decorates them." Kratos' hand shifted on the Leviathan axe. "Leave, Captain. This doesn't concern you." For a long moment, Clag stared at Kratos, warrior to warrior. Then, slowly, a smile crossed the Klingon's scarred face. "You misunderstand, Spartan. This isn't a request." The transmission cut off, and all 3 Klingon vessels powered their weapons to maximum, targeting not the Enterprise, but the convergence itself. The tactical display painted a stark picture. 3 Klingon Vorcha-class attack cruisers in attack formation, disruptor banks charged, photon torpedoes armed. But their weapons weren't aimed at the Enterprise. They were targeting the dimensional tears of the convergence itself. "Captain Clag, what is the meaning of this?" Picard's voice carried the steel of command authority, but underneath, Kratos detected something else. Concern, fear, even. The Klingon captain reappeared on screen, his expression cold and calculated. "Simple, Picard. If the Spartan will not join us willingly, then he will have no choice but to remain in this universe. We destroy the convergence. We eliminate his only path home. Then we see how long his independence lasts when he realizes he's trapped here forever. Worf's hands tightened on his console. Captain, this is dishonorable. To threaten... Clag! Another voice cut through the Klingon bridge. An older warrior with more scars and gray in his hair. This violates the code. We are warriors, not hostage takers. Silence, Drex! Clag snapped. The Empire needs warriors like him. If this is what it takes... Kratos was already moving. Worf, target their weapon systems, he commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge chaos with absolute authority. Disable them before they fire. I don't take orders from... Worf began. But Picard's hand rose. Do it, Mr. Worf. Fire. The Enterprise's phaser arrays lanced out, orange beams striking the lead Klingon vessel's forward disruptor banks. Shields flared, absorbed the impact. The Klingons had reinforced their defenses, expecting resistance. Their shields are holding at 93%, Worf reported. We'd need sustained fire to penetrate, and by then they'll have destroyed the convergence, Data finished grimly. Captain, the dimensional tiers are unstable. A concentrated barrage from 3 Vorcha-class vessels would cause cascading collapse. The resulting implosion would likely destroy everything within a 50,000-kilometer radius, including us, Riker added quietly. Kratos stared at the view screen, at the Klingon vessels positioning themselves for maximum destructive spread. His mind calculated vectors, timing, probability. 3 ships, multiple weapon systems. The convergence was massive. Even the Leviathan axe couldn't disable all 3 vessels fast enough. But he didn't need to disable all 3. He just needed to make them reconsider. Transport me to Captain Clagg's ship, Kratos said. Absolutely not, Picard responded immediately. Kratos, if you board that vessel, they'll simply hold you hostage and destroy the convergence anyway. You will have traded your freedom for nothing. No. Kratos turned to face the captain, and Picard saw something in those ancient eyes, not rage, not desperation, but cold tactical clarity. They want a warrior. I'll show them what warriors do when their path home is threatened. They're Klingons, Worf interjected, his voice carrying the weight of cultural understanding. They respect strength, yes. But this Captain Clag has abandoned honor for ambition. He won't be swayed by demonstrations of power. He'll keep you contained and destroy the convergence to force your compliance. Then I won't give him the chance to contain me. Kratos' grip on the Leviathan axe tightened. Captain Picard, you've shown me respect in a universe that largely demands my submission. So I'm asking, not demanding. Let me handle this. Troi stepped forward, her empathic senses reaching toward Kratos and finding something she hadn't expected, restraint, careful, measured control. Captain, he's not planning to kill them. He's planning something else. What? Picard asked. I don't know, Troi admitted. But there's calculation there. Strategy. Picard studied Kratos for a long moment, weighing options. The Klingons would fire in seconds. The Enterprise alone couldn't stop them. And sending Kratos into what was likely a trap went against every instinct he had. But sometimes, command meant trusting people to do what they did best. Mr. O'Brien, Picard spoke into his comm badge. Prepare to transport Kratos directly to Captain Clagg's bridge on his signal. Aye, sir, came O'Brien's uncertain reply. On the view screen, the Klingon vessel's weapons reached final charge. Clagg's voice came through. Last chance, Spartan. Join us or watch your only path home burn. Kratos stepped onto the transporter pad location marker on the bridge. Signal. The transporter beam took him, Kratos materialized on the bridge of the IKS Gorkon in a cascade of golden light and immediately assessed his tactical situation. 12 Klingon warriors, all armed with batleth or diktog blades, positions optimized for bridge defense. Captain Clag stood at the command chair, a disruptor pistol already drawn and aimed. The Spartan made no aggressive move. He simply stood, the Leviathan axe held loosely in one hand, and waited. Bold, Clag admitted, his disruptor not wavering. Foolish, but bold. You realize you're surrounded? That we could kill you where you stand? You could try. Kratos' tone carried no bravado, just statement of fact. But by the time I died, most of your bridge crew would be dead with me. Your weapons systems would be damaged, and the Enterprise would target your reactor core in the chaos. An acceptable trade, Clag said coldly. The Empire gains your death or your service. Either outcome serves. No, it doesn't. Kratos took a single step forward. Every Klingon warrior tensed, weapons rising. You claim to honor strength and combat prowess, but you threaten the defenseless convergence rather than face me directly. Where is the honor in that? There is no honor in letting a weapon like you escape our grasp, Clag countered. A weapon. Kratos' voice dropped dangerously low. Is that what you see? Then you understand nothing. Another step. I am not a weapon to be wielded. I am a warrior who chooses his own battles. And right now, I choose to give you a chance at what Klingons claim to value above all else. What chance? Single combat. Kratos planted the Leviathan axe on the deck plating, the sound ringing through the bridge like a gong. You and me, one-on-one. If you win, I will consider your Empire's offer seriously. If I win, you withdraw, and let me reach the convergence unopposed. The bridge fell silent. Every Klingon present understood the significance of such a challenge. It was ancient, traditional, the core of their warrior culture distilled to its purest form. The older Klingon, Drex, stepped forward. Captain, this is the honorable path. Accept the challenge. Clag's jaw tightened. His tactical mind ran calculations. Kratos had crippled a Romulan warbird, survived hard vacuum, defeated preserver technology. But Clag was a decorated warrior, veteran of dozens of campaigns, trained in every Klingon combat form since childhood. And pride, that ancient enemy of tactical thinking, whispered that refusing would mark him as coward. Very well, Clag said, holstering his disruptor and drawing his batleth, the curved blade gleaming under the bridge lights. Single combat, to the death or surrender, no interference. No. Kratos shook his head. Not to the death. First blood, or first to yield. Why? Clag's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Because I'm not here to kill you, Captain. I'm here to teach you a lesson about respect. Kratos gestured to the deck. Choose your ground. Clag studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Drex, clear the center deck. All warriors stand down, but remain ready. If he violates the terms of combat, kill him. The bridge crew moved with military precision, creating a circular space approximately 10 meters in diameter. Clag stepped into it, his batleth held in the traditional ready position, blade horizontal, both hands gripping the side handles. Kratos entered the circle from the opposite side. He left the Leviathan axe leaning against a console and uncoiled the blades of chaos from his hip, letting them hang at his sides. The chains clinked softly. The hellfire that usually wreathed them remained dormant, for now. No weapons? Clag asked, noting that Kratos held the blade handles but hadn't ignited them. I don't need them yet. Kratos dropped into a combat stance that looked deceptively casual, weight balanced, muscles loose, ready to explode in any direction. Begin. Clag attacked immediately, the bat'leth whistling through the air in a complex pattern designed to overwhelm and disorient. It was a technique that had killed enemies for years, aggressive, relentless, leaving no opening for counterattack. Kratos dodged, not blocked, not parried, just moved. Minimal motion, maximum efficiency, each strike missing by millimeters. The blades of chaos remained unignited, their chains loose and unthreatening. Clag pressed the attack, his experience and training evident in every movement. But Kratos was something beyond training. He was centuries of combat instinct made flesh, a being who'd fought gods and survived. He read Clag's patterns, anticipated strikes before muscles tensed to deliver them. "Fight back," Clag snarled, frustration creeping into his voice. "No," Kratos said calmly, dodging another overhead strike. "Not yet." The Klingon captain changed tactics, feinting high, then striking low, a move that had disemboweled opponents. Kratos sidestepped, and as Clag overextended, the Spartan's hand shot out, gripping the bat'leth's blade edge, barehanded, without flinching. "Impossible," Drex breathed. Kratos held the blade, his ash-gray skin somehow resisting the sharpened edge that should have sliced through flesh and bone. His eyes locked with Clag's. "You're skilled, well-trained, a warrior worthy of respect." Then he twisted. The bat'leth was ripped from Clag's grip with such casual strength that the Klingon stumbled backward. Kratos tossed the weapon aside, where it clattered across the deck plating. "But you're also arrogant," Kratos continued, advancing slowly. "You assumed that because I'm powerful, I must serve someone. You assumed that because you outnumber me, you could dictate terms. You assumed wrong." Clag drew his dikatag, the ceremonial dagger, and lunged with the desperation of a warrior who realizes he's outmatched. It was a killing strike, aimed at the heart. Kratos caught his wrist mid-thrust. The Spartan's grip was iron. Clag strained, muscles bulging, teeth gritted, pouring every ounce of his considerable strength into completing the strike. The blade trembled, millimeters from Kratos' chest, and didn't move forward. "First blood," Kratos said quietly, and his other hand shot forward, not to strike, but to press the edge of his own palm against Clag's cheek. A thin line of crimson appeared, not deep, not dangerous, just enough to draw blood. Kratos released him and stepped back. "I win." The bridge was silent except for Clag's heavy breathing. The captain touched his cheek, looked at the blood on his fingers, then at Kratos with an expression of profound confusion. "You could have killed me," Clag said slowly. "Easily. I felt your strength. You could have crushed my wrist, snapped my neck, torn me apart. Why didn't you?" "Because killing you serves no purpose," Kratos replied. "You're a warrior doing what you believe serves your people. I respect that. But respect flows both ways, Captain. You wanted a warrior for your empire? Warriors aren't collected like trophies. They choose their allegiances." Drex stepped forward, his aged face showing something approaching reverence. "He fights with honor and mercy. The ancient way, before the Empire lost its soul to ambition." Clag stood slowly, wiping the blood from his face. His expression cycled through emotions: shame, respect, anger, and finally, grudging acceptance. "You have won, Spartan. I apologize for the dishonor I showed. The convergence will remain untouched." "More than that," Kratos said. "Tell your empire about today. Tell them that real warriors don't need chains to serve. They choose causes worth fighting for. Your empire wants strong warriors. Show them causes worth dying for, not threats to force compliance." Clag met his gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Kapla, Kratos. You honor the warrior's code more than many who were born to it. On the Enterprise bridge, sensors detected the Klingon weapons powering down. Picard let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. "The Klingons are standing down," Worf reported, his voice carrying proud disbelief. "They're withdrawing to a respectful distance." "Hailing the Gorkon," Data added. "Captain Clag wishes to speak with you, sir." Picard nodded. On screen, Clag appeared, still standing on his bridge, a med patch now covering his cheek wound. Behind him, Kratos stood by the transporter pad, ready to return to the Enterprise. "Captain Picard, the Spartan has taught us a valuable lesson today. We will not interfere with his journey, and I..." Clag hesitated, pride warring with honesty. "I apologize for threatening an act that would have destroyed you alongside the Convergence. It was unworthy." "Apology accepted, Captain," Picard said graciously. "And thank you for recognizing the honorable path." "Thank him," Clag gestured to Kratos. "He reminded us what honor truly means." The transmission ended. Kratos materialized back on the Enterprise bridge, and the crew turned to look at him with expressions ranging from relief to awe. "What did you do?" Troy asked quietly. "I showed them that strength without honor is weakness," Kratos replied, "and that warriors are earned, not taken." Picard stood, straightening his uniform. "Well done, Mr. Kratos. That was unexpectedly diplomatic." "I've learned that not every problem requires killing," Kratos said. "Sometimes respect is more effective than violence." He paused, "though violence remains an option if respect fails." Worf actually smiled, a rare sight. Spoken like a true warrior. "Captain," Data interrupted, his console lighting up with new readings. "The preservers are hailing. They say the Convergence is ready. They've calculated the dimensional frequency required to open a pathway to Kratos' home reality. But there's a problem." "What problem?" Kratos' voice went flat and dangerous. "The energy required to maintain the portal is substantial, and the window of opportunity is narrow, approximately 47 seconds. After that, the dimensional barriers will reseal for at least a century. 47 seconds. Less than a minute to return home or be trapped in this universe forever." Kratos looked out at the wounded space of the Convergence, at the bleeding tears between realities that represented his only chance to keep his promise to Atreus. "Then we'd better not waste time," he said. And deep in the fractured dimensions of the Convergence, something stirred. Something that had been watching, waiting, drawn to the convergence of power and possibility. Something that fed on chaos and thrived in the spaces between worlds. The path home was open, but it wasn't unguarded. The preserver vessels positioned themselves around the Convergence in a triangular formation, their crystallized hulls beginning to pulse with the synchronized energy. Data monitored the readings from his console, his positronic brain processing information faster than any organic could comprehend. "Captain, the preservers are channeling exotic matter through subspace manifolds, creating a resonance cascade designed to stabilize a specific dimensional frequency," Data reported. "It's elegant. Theoretically, it should create a temporary bridge between our universe and Kratos' home reality." "Theoretically?" Riker repeated. "I don't like the sound of that." "Nor should you, Commander." Data's fingers danced across his console. "The energy output required is approaching levels that would normally trigger stellar collapse. If the resonance cascade fails, the feedback could create a gravitational singularity." "A black hole," Picard said quietly. "Wonderful." Kratos stood at the bridge viewport, watching the preservers work. The Leviathan axe was in his hand, the blades of chaos coiled at his hip. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers drummed against the axe handle in a rhythmic pattern. Not nervousness, but anticipation. "How long?" he asked. "The preservers estimate 3.7 minutes until the portal achieves stability," Data replied. "Then you'll have 47 seconds to..." The ship lurched violently. Red alert klaxons screamed through the Enterprise. Worf's tactical console exploded with warnings. "Captain, massive energy spike from inside the convergence." Worf's voice carried genuine alarm, rare for the stoic Klingon. "Something is emerging from the dimensional tiers." On the view screen, reality itself seemed to scream. The wounded space of the convergence convulsed, and from the largest tear, a wound in existence easily a kilometer across, something forced its way through. It was difficult to look at directly. The entity existed in too many dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between states of matter, energy, and something beyond both. One moment it appeared as a massive serpentine shape composed of living shadow. The next, it was a geometric impossibility of crystallized light. Then, it was something else entirely. A collection of screaming faces, a storm of grasping hands, a void that somehow possessed malevolent consciousness. "What is that?" Troy gasped, her empathic senses recoiling from the tsunami of alien hunger emanating from the creature. The preserver's transmission came through, their usual emotionless communication replaced with something approaching panic. Dimensional parasite detected. Classification: Realm Devourer. Threat level: Extinction class. It feeds on the energy between dimensions. Our portal generation has attracted it. We must abort. "Belay that!" Kratos' voice cut through the bridge chaos. "Don't stop. Open the portal." "Impossible. The parasite will consume the portal energy and grow exponentially. It will devour this entire region of space." "Then I'll kill it while you work." Kratos was already moving toward the turbolift. "How long until the portal is ready?" Data checked his readings. 2 minutes, 43 seconds. "But Captain, the entity's energy signature is reading at levels that dwarf anything in our database. It's phase shifting between dimensions. Our weapons may not even affect it." "Your weapons won't." Kratos stepped into the turbolift. "Mine will." Picard stood. "Kratos, wait. This is suicide. Whatever that thing is, it's between me and my son." The Spartan's eyes burned with absolute resolve. "Nothing stands between me and my son. Not gods, not empires, and certainly not some parasite that feeds on broken worlds." The turbolift doors closed. Picard turned to his crew, command decisions crystallizing in microseconds. "Mr. Worf, target that thing with everything we have. Full spread of photon torpedoes. Let's see if we can at least distract it." "Aye, sir." Worf's hands moved across tactical. "Torpedoes away." 6 photon torpedoes streaked toward the dimensional parasite, their matter-antimatter warheads containing enough destructive force to vaporize a small moon. They struck the creature's constantly shifting form and passed through it harmlessly, detonating in empty space beyond. "It phase-shifted," Data reported. "The entity exists partially in our dimension and partially in others simultaneously. Conventional weapons cannot touch it because it's never entirely present in our reality." "Then how does Kratos plan to..." Riker began. "Because his weapons aren't conventional," Troy interrupted, her voice distant as she tracked Kratos' emotional signature moving through the ship. "They're mythological. They operate on rules that predate physics." On the view screen, the dimensional parasite began moving toward the preserver vessels, drawn to the exotic energies they were channeling. Appendages that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously reached out, and where they touched, reality dissolved. One preserver vessel couldn't evade in time. The parasite's touch turned its crystallized hull into quantum foam, matter and energy unmaking themselves at the fundamental level. The ship simply ceased to exist, its entire mass converted into raw dimensional fuel that the creature absorbed hungrily. Vessel lost. Portal generation destabilizing. We cannot maintain focus while defending ourselves. Aborting procedure. No. Kratos' voice came through the comm system. Hold position. I'm coming. In the transporter room, Chief O'Brien looked up from his console as Kratos entered. Sir, I can't transport you onto that thing. It's not stable enough for a lock. I'd be scattering your atoms across 3 dimensions. Then transport me close. Kratos stepped onto the pad. As close as you can. That's still hard vacuum, and that thing's radiation output would kill... O'Brien stopped, remembering who he was talking to. Right. You've done this before. Energizing. The transporter beam took Kratos, depositing him in the void approximately 50 meters from the dimensional parasite. Once again, he found himself in the silent emptiness of space, his divine constitution the only thing between him and death. But this time was different. This time, reality itself felt wrong. The parasite's presence distorted space-time, made geometry non-Euclidean, turned the concept of distance into a suggestion rather than a law. 50 meters might as well have been 50 light years or 50 centimeters. Space had ceased to function normally. The creature noticed him immediately. It turned, or what passed for turning when you existed in multiple dimensions, and focused its attention on this new presence. Appendages reached toward him, phase shifting through reality, existing everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Kratos hurled the Leviathan axe. The weapon spun through the distorted space, trailing absolute zero in its wake. It struck one of the creature's appendages, and this time didn't pass through. The axe buried itself in the parasite's multidimensional flesh, and frost erupted across forms that existed in realities where temperature shouldn't mean anything. The creature screamed. A sound that transcended physics, felt rather than heard, registering as pain in every crew member's mind across 3 ships. It's working. Data's voice carried genuine surprise. The axe is somehow anchoring portions of the entity into our dimension, making it vulnerable to conventional physics. Kratos pulled, and the Leviathan axe ripped free, returning to his hand. Where it had struck, the parasite's flesh remained frozen, locked into singular dimensional existence. It was a wound that couldn't phase shift away. The creature retaliated. Reality inverted around Kratos. Up became down, forward became backward. Time hiccuped and stuttered. He was simultaneously in space and falling through infinite dimensions, drowning in the gaps between worlds. But Kratos had drowned before. In the river Styx, in the waters of the Lake of Nine, in the depths of his own guilt and rage. And he'd always clawed his way back. Spartan rage erupted. Divine fury manifested as crimson power that rejected the parasite's reality manipulation. Where the creature tried to phase shift space around him, Kratos' rage anchored reality, forcing it to be what he demanded it to be. His will versus the fundamental laws of dimensional physics, and his will was winning. He uncoiled the blades of chaos. The chains ignited with hellfire that burned in dimensions the parasite thought safe. Kratos swung them in patterns perfected through centuries of slaughter, and where the blades touched the creature's shifting form, it burned with fires that shouldn't exist outside Greek mythology. The parasite thrashed, its massive form convulsing. Appendages lashed out, striking Kratos with force that would have shattered starship hulls. The Spartan was thrown backward through space, his body tumbling, and he used the blades to arrest his momentum, the chains wrapping around a piece of the creature's anatomy, pulling himself back toward it like a grappling hook. On the Enterprise bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as Kratos fought something that defied comprehension. His small form darting around the massive entity, striking, retreating, striking again. It looked like an ancient god battling a primordial chaos serpent. Mythology made real in the sterile void of space. Portal generation resuming, Data reported. The preservers are using Kratos' engagement to refocus their efforts. Portal stability reaching 60%, 70%. Picard gripped his command chair. How long until it's ready? 90 seconds. On the view screen, the dimensional parasite decided to change tactics. If it couldn't phase shift away from Kratos' weapons, it would overwhelm him with sheer mass and power. The creature's form expanded, growing larger, drawing energy from the dimensional tiers to fuel its expansion. It had fed on the death of universes. What was one warrior, no matter how powerful? The parasite's massive bulk lunged toward Kratos, appendages converging from multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating a trap that existed in 17 different realities at once. There was no escape, no dodge, no retreat, nowhere to be that wouldn't result in being caught. Kratos didn't try to escape. He drove the Leviathan axe into the creature's central mass, if it had such a thing, and unleashed every ounce of frost power the weapon contained. Absolute Zero erupted, not as a localized effect, but as a cascading wave of entropy reduction. Temperature dropped to levels where quantum mechanics broke down, where energy itself froze solid. The parasite's multidimensional form couldn't escape because there was nowhere to escape to. The cold existed in every dimension it occupied, simultaneously. Its appendages froze mid-strike. Its massive bulk crystallized, locked into singular dimensional existence. For the first time in eons, the dimensional parasite was entirely, completely, vulnerably present in one reality. Now, Kratos roared, though no sound carried through vacuum. But the preservers understood. The portal snapped into full existence, a tear in space that blazed with power, showing glimpses of another universe beyond. Mountains covered in snow, a cabin in the woods, a young man with a bow looking up at the sky as if sensing something. Atreus. But the portal was directly behind the frozen parasite. To reach it, Kratos would have to go through the creature itself. Portal stable, Data called out. But the 47-second countdown has begun. 46, 45. Kratos ripped the Leviathan axe free and ignited the blades of chaos to their maximum fury. Hellfire and Absolute Zero working in tandem. Thermodynamic impossibility made. Weapon. He charged. Not around the parasite. Through it. The blades carved burning wounds through the frozen flesh. The axe shattered crystallized appendages. Kratos tore his way through the creature's mass with brutal efficiency, treating the multi-dimensional horror as nothing more than an obstacle between him and home. 30 seconds. The parasite wasn't dead. Couldn't die by any conventional definition. But it was wounded, frozen, momentarily vulnerable. And in that moment, Kratos reached its center. He planted both feet against what might have been the creature's core and kicked off with divine strength, propelling himself toward the portal while simultaneously driving the parasite backward, away from the dimensional tear. 20 seconds. Kratos flew through space toward the portal, toward home, toward the promise he'd made to his son. But the parasite, even wounded and frozen, reached out with one final appendage. It caught Kratos' leg, the touch beginning to unmake him at the molecular level, trying to convert him into dimensional fuel. 15 seconds. Pain beyond description erupted through Kratos' body. His leg was being erased from existence, atom by atom. But pain was an old companion, a familiar enemy. He'd endured the torture of the Furies, the judgment of the Sisters of Fate, the wrath of every god in 2 pantheons. This was just one more wound. Kratos swung the Leviathan axe one final time, severing the appendage that held him. The limb and part of his leg dissolved into quantum foam, but he was free. 10 seconds. He tumbled through space toward the portal, bleeding something that wasn't quite blood, his vision dimming at the edges. Behind him, the dimensional parasite thrashed, beginning to recover, beginning to shift dimensions again. 5 seconds. The Enterprise fired everything it had at the creature, phasers, torpedoes, even the deflector dish weaponized, not to kill it, but to keep it distracted, to buy Kratos precious milliseconds. 3, 2, 1. Kratos reached the portal and fell through. The dimensional tear sealed behind him with a sound like reality sighing in relief. The parasite denied its prey, and wounded beyond its understanding, retreated back into the deeper dimensional tiers, fleeing to recover in the spaces between worlds. On the Enterprise bridge, silence reigned. The view screen showed the convergence returning to its previous state of wounded stability, the preserver vessels resuming their positions, the Klingon ships maintaining respectful distance. But Kratos was gone. Did he? Troy's voice was barely a whisper. Did he make it? Data's fingers moved across his console, analyzing the portal's final moments, tracking quantum signatures through dimensional barriers that shouldn't be trackable. The portal successfully connected to a dimension matching Kratos' origin signature. He passed through approximately 0.3 seconds before it collapsed. Whether he survived the transition in his injured state. Data paused. Unknown. Picard stood slowly, staring at the empty space where the portal had been. He survived hard vacuum. He fought a creature that eats realities. He killed gods, Mr. Data. I suspect he'll survive this too. Worf spoke, his voice carrying the respect of one warrior for another. Kapla, Kratos. May you find your son and the peace you seek. The crew stood in silence, each processing what they'd witnessed. A warrior from myth had fallen into their universe, challenged their assumptions, fought their enemies, and earned their respect. And then he'd returned home through sheer force of will, refusing to accept any outcome except reunion with his family. Sir, the helmsman broke the silence. Orders? Picard straightened his uniform, command decisions already forming. Set course for Starbase 234. We have a rather unusual first contact report to file. And someone alert sickbay. They're going to want to analyze the biological samples Kratos left in the transporter buffer. I suspect they'll be studying those for years. The preservers are hailing, Data reported, on screen. The emotionless communication came through. Entity Kratos has departed this reality. Dimensional stability restored. We thank you for your assistance in this matter. The multiverse is safer with him, returned to his proper dimension. We offer one final observation. In our eons of existence, we have encountered millions of species, billions of individuals. Few possess the strength to reshape reality through will alone. Kratos is one such being. Your universe is fortunate he did not wish to remain. The transmission ended, and the preserver vessels engaged whatever passed for their warp drives, vanishing into the stellar distance. Guinan's voice came through Picard's comm badge. Captain, you might want to come to 10 forward. People are asking questions about what just happened, and I think they need to hear it from you. Picard smiled slightly. On my way, Guinan. He turned to Riker. Number 1, you have the bridge. I'm going to go explain to the crew how we just helped a god killer return home to his son. Good luck with that, sir, Riker said with a slight smile. As Picard entered the turbo lift, he paused, looking back at his bridge crew. his family. They'd witnessed something unprecedented today. They'd helped facilitate something impossible. And they'd all survived an encounter with a being who could have destroyed them as easily as breathing. But Kratos hadn't. Because beneath the rage, beneath the divine power and centuries of trauma, he was still a father trying to keep a promise to his son. Perhaps, Picard thought, that made him more than a god killer. It made him human. Midgard. The realm between realms. Kratos crashed through the dimensional barrier like a meteor through atmosphere, reality itself screaming in protest as mythology forced its way back into a world that remembered gods. The portal spat him out above the Lake of Nine, and he fell, wounded, exhausted, bleeding divine ichor from where the parasite had tried to unmake him. He struck the water with enough force to send up a geyser that would have drowned villages. The icy shock of familiar cold embraced him like an old friend. This was Midgard. This was home. The water here knew him, remembered the blood of gods he'd spilled in its depths. Kratos sank, his vision darkening, his divine constitution struggling to heal wounds that existed partially across dimensional boundaries. His leg, what remained of it, was a mangled ruin that would take even his godly healing days to fully restore. The Leviathan axe slipped from his grip, sinking toward the lake bottom. He was home, but he was dying. No. The thought came with absolute clarity. Not yet. Not before I see him. Kratos forced his arm to move, reaching out, calling to the axe with the bond they shared. The weapon responded, flying up through the water, slamming back into his hand with the loyalty of a tool that had never failed him. He kicked with his one good leg, propelling himself upward. His lungs burned. Even gods needed air eventually. The surface seemed impossibly far, the darkness at the edges of his vision closing in like Helheim's eternal night. His head broke the surface. He gasped, drawing in air that tasted of pine and snow and home. The shore was distant, perhaps 100 meters. Too far for a mortal in his condition. Good thing he wasn't mortal. Kratos began to swim, each stroke agony, each meter of victory over the void that wanted to claim him. The blades of chaos dragged at his waist, their chains heavy with the weight of his past. But he'd carried that weight for decades. 100 meters was nothing compared to the distance between dimensions. His hand touched sand, then rock. He dragged himself onto the shore, leaving a trail of golden ichor and dimensional residue that made the ground shimmer with impossible colors. He collapsed onto his back, staring up at Midgard's gray sky, and for just a moment allowed himself to simply be. He was home. Father. The voice came from up the shore, young and desperate and achingly familiar. Footsteps pounded against rock, growing closer. Kratos turned his head, even that simple motion requiring tremendous effort, and saw him. Atreus. The boy had grown in the time Kratos had been gone. Not much. It had only been days here, perhaps, while he'd spent what felt like weeks in the Star Trek universe. But there was something different in his son's eyes. A haunted quality. The look of someone who'd feared the worst. Father. Atreus dropped to his knees beside Kratos, his hands hovering uncertainly over the wounds. What happened? You disappeared. Ooh. Through the dimensional tear, and then you were just gone. I searched everywhere. His voice cracked. I thought you'd left me, like I did before. Kratos finished quietly. I promised you I would return. I keep my promises now. You're hurt? Atreus' hands glowed with soft golden light, his own godly heritage manifesting as healing magic. It wasn't much, but it would help. What did this to you? What was on the other side of that tear? Another universe. Kratos accepted the healing, feeling his legs slowly knitting back together, atoms remembering what shape they were supposed to take. One without gods, without magic. They had something else instead: technology, vast ships that sailed between stars, entire empires spanning galaxies. And they did this to you. Atreus' voice carried disbelief. A universe without gods had wounded the Ghost of Sparta? No. Kratos sat up slowly, wincing. They tried to help. Some wanted to control me, others to study me. But one, a captain named Picard, he treated me with respect, helped me find the way home. He looked at his son. I fought a creature between dimensions to get back to you. Lost part of my leg doing it. But I'm here. Atreus' eyes shimmered with tears he was too proud to shed. You fought through dimensions for me. I would tear apart existence itself for you, boy. Kratos reached out, gripping his son's shoulder. You are all I have left that matters. No universe, no God, no force in creation will keep me from you. They sat in silence for a moment, father and son, reunited on the shore of a lake that had witnessed the death of gods and the breaking of fate itself. Finally, Atreus spoke. Did you kill anyone there, in that other universe? Kratos considered the question. No, I fought, demonstrated power, made them respect boundaries, but I killed no one. He met his son's gaze. I am trying to be better, Atreus. Trying to be the father you deserve, not the monster I was. You were never a monster, Atreus said softly. Just someone who was hurt too badly for too long. Wise words. A new voice interrupted them. Feminine, powerful, carrying the weight of cosmic awareness. Both father and son turned to see Freya approaching, her expression mixing relief with something approaching awe. You've returned, and you brought back interesting residue. She gestured to the dimensional traces still clinging to Kratos, the quantum signatures that marked him as someone who'd crossed universal boundaries. Her magic could sense them, interpret them, and her eyes widened as she understood the implications. You traveled to a universe fundamentally different from ours, Freya said. A place where the laws of reality operate on entirely separate principles. The fact that you survived the transition. She shook her head. Even the Allfather at his peak might not have managed that. The Allfather is dead, Kratos said flatly. And his peak was a lie. I survived because I had no choice. My son needed me. Freya knelt beside them, her hands glowing with Vanir magic far more potent than Atreus' nascent abilities. Let me help. These wounds are complex. Part of you is still partially phased between dimensions. If left untreated, you'll never fully heal. Kratos tensed. Accepting help from gods was still difficult, even from allies. But Atreus' hand on his arm steadied him. Let her help, father. Please. Slowly, Kratos nodded. Freya's magic washed over him, and he felt reality itself remember what shape he should take. The dimensional phasing collapsed, his atoms fully committing to existing in Midgard again. The wounds from the parasite's attack finally began healing properly. Flesh knitting, bone reforming. There, Freya said after several minutes of intense focus. You'll be sore for a few days, but you'll heal fully. She sat back, studying him. What was it like, that other universe? Kratos was silent for a long moment, remembering. The Enterprise's sterile corridors, Picard's diplomatic idealism, Data's curious questions, Worf's warrior respect, the vastness of space, and the terrifying wonder of the convergence. Hopeful, he finally said. They'd built a civilization without gods dictating their fate, without pantheons demanding worship. They chose cooperation over conquest, exploration over exploitation. It was, he struggled for the word, naive, but genuine. Did you tell them? Freya asked. What you are, what you've done? They knew I'd killed gods, toppled pantheons, destroyed realms. Kratos looked down at his ash-gray hands, still stained with his family's ashes, a reminder he'd carried for decades. And they still tried to help me, still treated me as a person, not a weapon or a threat to be eliminated. Maybe that's what the future looks like, Atreus said quietly. A world where people are judged by who they choose to be, not what they were forced to become. Kratos looked at his son, seeing the idealism there, so different from his own hard-earned cynicism. But perhaps that was good. Perhaps each generation was meant to be better than the last, to carry hope the previous generation had lost. Perhaps, Kratos allowed, but that future is far away. For now, we have more immediate concerns. The realms are still unstable, Freya confirmed. Your disappearance through the dimensional tear caused ripples. Other tiers have been opening, small ones, but growing. We need to seal them before something else comes through. Something else? Atreus looked worried. Like what? Like the creature I fought in the space between universes, Kratos said grimly. It feeds on dimensional instability. If the tiers keep growing, it, or things like it, will be drawn here. And Midgard is not prepared for beings that exist outside reality itself. Freya's expression darkened. Then we have work to do. The realms won't stabilize themselves. No. Kratos stood slowly, testing his newly healed leg. It held. They won't. But first, he turned to Atreus. I need you to understand something. The universe I visited, they had achieved things we can barely imagine. Ships that cross galaxies, medicine that defeats death, technology that seems like magic. But they'd also lost something. What? Atreus asked. The understanding that some things can't be reasoned with, can't be negotiated with, can only be fought. Kratos gripped the Leviathan axe. They tried to solve every problem with words and ideals. Sometimes that works. But when it doesn't, they're unprepared for violence. They've forgotten that peace is only possible when you're strong enough to defend it. So we need both, Atreus said thoughtfully. The strength to fight when necessary, and the wisdom to know when fighting isn't the answer. Kratos actually smiled, a rare, genuine expression. You've grown wise, boy. Wiser than I was at your age, wiser than I am now. I had a good teacher. Atreus smiled back, even if he's terrible at explaining his lessons. I am better with demonstrations. Kratos' smile faded as he looked toward the horizon, where reality shimmered with the instability Freya had mentioned. Come, we have dimensional tiers to seal, and if any creatures try to cross over, they'll learn what happens when they threaten our realm. What about the people from that other universe? Atreus asked as they began walking. Will they be okay? Without you there to protect them? Kratos considered the question. He thought of Picard's diplomatic skill, Worf's warrior spirit, Data's curious intellect, the Enterprise crew's dedication to their ideals, despite how fragile those ideals sometimes seemed. They'll be fine, Kratos said finally. They're stronger than they look. And sometimes, the best way to help people is to let them face their challenges themselves, to let them prove they can survive without someone else fighting their battles. Is that why you made me learn to hunt? To fight? To survive on my own? Yes. Kratos' hand settled on his son's shoulder as they walked. Because I won't always be here, Atreus. Gods die. Spartans die. Everyone dies eventually. When that day comes, you need to be ready to stand on your own. But not today, Atreus said firmly. Today you're here. Today I'm here, Kratos agreed. They walked together along the Lake of Nine's shore, father and son, heading toward the shimmering tiers in reality that needed sealing. Behind them, Freya followed, her magic already weaving protective wards. Above, Midgard's gray clouds parted slightly, and for just a moment, stars became visible. Stars from this universe, familiar constellations Kratos had known all his life. But he couldn't help remembering the different stars he'd seen through the Enterprise's view screen. The vast galaxy of possibilities that existed in that other reality. 2 universes. One governed by myths and gods and ancient power. The other by science and reason and idealistic cooperation. Both had their strengths. Both had their flaws. But only one had his son. And that made the choice simple. Father? Atreus' voice pulled him from his thoughts. Are you all right? Yes. Kratos tightened his grip on the Leviathan axe, feeling its familiar weight, its cold power. I'm exactly where I need to be. In the distance, a dimensional tear pulsed with unstable energy. Beyond it, he could sense something watching. Not the parasite he'd fought, but something else. Another creature drawn to the weakness between worlds. Kratos' eyes narrowed. The blades of chaos ignited with hellfire, their chains rattling with anticipation. Come then, he growled toward the tear. Cross into Midgard if you dare. Learn what happens when you threaten my realm, my son, my home. The presence beyond the tear hesitated, as if sensing the predatory certainty in Kratos' challenge. Then it withdrew, retreating into whatever dimensional space it had come from, deciding that perhaps this particular realm wasn't worth the cost of entry. Wise choice. Atreus watched his father, seeing the Ghost of Sparta in full form, not raging, not berserk, but controlled and absolutely deadly. This was the warrior who'd killed 2 pantheons, toppled divine orders, and just recently fought through dimensions to keep a promise. They're scared of you, Atreus observed. Good, Kratos replied. Fear keeps threats at bay better than walls or shields. They should be scared. Anything that threatens what I protect should be terrified. Freya caught up to them, her magic having sealed the first of the dimensional tiers. The others are deeper in the realm. We'll need to travel to each one. It might take days. Then, we travel for days. Kratos turned to look at both of them, his son and the goddess who become an unlikely ally. Together, as we should have from the beginning. And so they set out. 3 beings of divine heritage walking through a realm still recovering from the death of its gods, working to seal the wounds between worlds before something catastrophic crossed over. Above them, reality rippled, dimensional barriers slowly stabilizing as they worked. And far away, in a universe of starships and federations, a certain captain looked up at his own stars and wondered if the warrior they'd helped had made it home safely. The multiverse was infinite, full of possibilities and dangers, wonders and horrors. But in both universes, some truths remained constant. Family was worth fighting for. Promises were worth keeping. And sometimes, strength and wisdom working together could accomplish what neither could alone. The Ghost of Sparta had returned home, and Midgard was safer for it. 3 days later, the dimensional tiers had proven more numerous than Freya initially assessed. 47 in total, scattered across Midgard like wounds in reality's skin, each one pulsing with unstable energy that threatened to widen if left untreated. Kratos, Atreus, and Freya had traveled from the Lake of Nine to the frozen peaks of the mountain, from the fiery depths of Muspelheim's border regions to the misty shores near Tyr's temple. Each tear required different approaches, Some responded to Freya's veneer magic, reality knitting itself closed under her guidance. Others needed Atreus' unique blend of mortal will and divine heritage, his ability to exist between definitions proving invaluable. But the worst tiers, the ones that connected to truly hostile dimensions, required Kratos. The Spartan had become expert at identifying which dimensional rifts harbored threats. He could sense them the way a predator senses prey. The hunger of entities that fed on chaos, the curiosity of beings that viewed other dimensions as hunting grounds, the malevolence of things that should never exist in any reality. Those tears he didn't seal gently. Now they stood before the final rift, deep in the Ironwood, a forest on Midgard's eastern edge where reality had always been thin. This tear was different from the others, larger, more stable. And through it, Kratos could see something that made even his battle-hardened instincts pause. Another world, not hostile, not threatening, just different. Through the dimensional window, they glimpsed a city of impossible architecture. Buildings that defied gravity, streets that flowed like water, beings that looked almost humanoid but shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. Music drifted through, alien but hauntingly beautiful. "It's gorgeous," Atreus breathed, stepping closer to the tear. "Father, look, it's an entire civilization we've never seen. Think of what we could learn." Kratos gripped his son's shoulder, gently but firmly pulling him back. "We could learn, but we won't. Not today." "Why not?" Atreus' tone carried frustration, the eternal question of youth confronting caution. "Isn't this what the All-Father would have done? Explored, gathered knowledge. The All-Father's curiosity came at the cost of others' suffering," Freya said quietly. "He took knowledge by force, used it to dominate. The tears must be sealed, Atreus. Not because we fear what's beyond them, but because leaving them open invites disaster." "She's right," Kratos added. "I learned this in the other universe. Their Federation explored constantly, seeking new civilizations, new knowledge. Sometimes it worked, but sometimes they found things they weren't prepared for. Sometimes their curiosity led to death." He looked at the beautiful city through the tear. "This realm seems peaceful now, but we don't know what else might use this tear to cross over. What if the parasite returned? What if something worse found this path?" Atreus studied the distant civilization for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We can't risk others' safety for our curiosity." He raised his hands, golden light building between his palms. "But maybe, someday, when the realms are truly stable, we could explore properly, with permission, with respect." "Maybe," Kratos allowed, "but not today." Together, father, son, and goddess, they channeled their combined power into the final tier. Freya's Vanir magic wove reality's threads back together. Atreus' divine heritage provided the bridge between mortal understanding and cosmic force. And Kratos' sheer will, forged through the death of two pantheons, anchored everything with absolute certainty that the tier would close. The dimensional rift resisted at first, reality reluctant to give up its glimpse into other possibilities. But under their combined assault, it had no choice. The tear shrank, the view of the alien city growing smaller, until finally it winked out of existence with a sound like a bell ringing in reverse. Silence settled over the Ironwood. Birds resumed their songs, wind rustled through leaves. The forest, sensing that the wrongness had been corrected, seemed to breathe easier. "It's done," Freya said, lowering her hands. "All 47 tiers sealed. The realms should stabilize now. No more dimensional incursions, no more threats from beyond. For now, Kratos added, his tactical mind already cataloging future concerns. But we'll need to monitor the weak points. Make sure they don't reopen. I can do that, Atreus offered. Set up warning wards. Check them regularly. It'll be good practice for my magic. Freya smiled. I'll teach you. Proper dimensional wardcraft is complex, but you have the talent for it. They began the journey back toward the Lake of Nine, exhaustion settling over all three of them. Even gods grew tired after days of reality manipulation. The path through the ironwood was peaceful, afternoon light filtering through the canopy, creating patterns of shadow and gold. Father? Atreus broke the comfortable silence. Can I ask you something about that other universe? You may ask. The people there, the Federation, they didn't have gods telling them what to do, how to live. They chose their own path, made their own mistakes, built their own civilization. Do you think... Atreus hesitated. Do you think we could do that here, now that the gods are gone? Kratos walked several paces before answering, considering the weight of the question. We already are, boy. Every choice we make, every problem we solve without divine intervention, we're building that world. It won't look like the Federation, won't have their starships or their technology. But it will be ours, earned through our strength and our choices. The All-Father would hate it, Freya observed with dark satisfaction. A world where mortals shape their own destiny, where power doesn't automatically grant authority. He'd see it as chaos. Good, Kratos said flatly. Let him hate it from hell. The age of gods ruling through fear and manipulation is over. If the mortals of Midgard want guidance, they can seek it. But they'll never again be forced to worship, forced to serve, forced to sacrifice for beings who see them as playthings. Did you tell that to the Federation? Atreus asked. About what you'd done, about killing the gods? I did. They were troubled by it, but they understood in their way. They'd encountered beings of immense power before, some benevolent, some malevolent, all dangerous. They knew that sometimes the only way to free yourself from tyranny is to kill the tyrants. But they tried to do it without killing first, Atreus said thoughtfully. That Captain Picard you mentioned, he tried diplomacy, tried peaceful solutions, only fought when he had no choice. Yes. Kratos nodded. It made him weak in some ways, but strong in others. His crew followed him not from fear, but from respect, from belief in his ideals. That's a power the gods never understood, the strength that comes from genuine loyalty rather than enforced obedience. They emerged from the ironwood as the sun began setting, painting Midgard's sky in shades of amber and crimson. The Lake of Nine stretched before them, its waters calm now, no longer disturbed by dimensional instability. In the distance, they could see their cabin. Small, simple, but home. Freya stopped at the forest's edge. I'll leave you here. The dwarves have been sending messages. Something about upgrading your equipment with the dimensional residue you brought back. Apparently, exposure to different universal laws has made your weapons even more interesting to them. Tell Brock and Sindri they can examine the axe and blades tomorrow, Kratos said. Tonight, I need rest. As do we all. Freya smiled. You did well, Kratos. Both of you. The realms are safer because of your actions, in this universe and the other. She departed, her magic carrying her toward the mountain's peak, where the dwarves made their forge. Father and son continued toward the cabin, their footsteps synchronized after days of traveling together. Atreus, Kratos said as they neared home. What I said before, about being better than I was, I meant it. The universe I visited showed me something important. They'd built a civilization based on ideals that seemed impossible. cooperation between species that had been enemies, peace achieved through strength used wisely, not violently. It was naive, yes, fragile, but it existed. You think we could build something like that here? I think you could. Kratos stopped, turning to face his son fully. I'm a warrior, Atreus, a killer. I can protect, I can destroy, I can fight. But building? Creating something better? That's not what I was made for. He gripped his son's shoulder. But you were. You have your mother's wisdom, her compassion, her hope. And you have enough of my strength to protect those ideals when they're threatened. You can be what I never could, the bridge between the old ways and something better. Atreus' eyes shimmered. You really believe that? I know it. Kratos released his son's shoulder. You're better than I was. Better than I am. And that's exactly as it should be. Each generation should surpass the last, should learn from their parents' mistakes and do better. They reached the cabin as full dark settled over Midgard. Inside, it was exactly as they'd left it. Simple, sparse, but comfortable. Atreus lit the fire while Kratos set down his weapons, the Leviathan axe and blades of chaos, finally at rest after days of constant use. Father, Atreus said from the fire, thank you for fighting through dimensions to come back, for keeping your promise. I told you before, I will always come back. Kratos settled into his chair, exhaustion finally catching up to him. No matter what stands between us, no gods, no empires, no dimensional parasites, nothing. What if something did stop you someday? Atreus' voice was quiet, almost afraid. What if you couldn't come back? Kratos was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. Then you would survive anyway, because I've taught you everything I know. How to hunt, how to fight, how to think tactically, how to protect those weaker than yourself, how to show mercy when strength could destroy. He looked at his son. You don't need me anymore, Atreus. Not really. You're ready. But I still want you here, Atreus said simply. And I'm here. Kratos allowed himself a small smile. For as long as fate allows, and when that time ends, whenever it comes, you'll honor my memory not by mourning, but by being better than I was. By building the world I never could. By proving that the death of the gods wasn't an ending, but a beginning. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Father and son united by bonds stronger than any divine mandate. Outside, Midgard's night settled over the realm, peaceful, stable, safe. In a universe far away, measured in dimensional frequencies rather than distance. The USS Enterprise continued its mission of exploration and discovery. Captain Picard stood on his bridge, looking at stars arranged in constellations this universe had mapped centuries ago. He wondered occasionally about the warrior they'd helped return home, whether he'd made it safely, whether he'd found his son, whether the reunion had been everything Kratos had fought for. The captain would never know for certain. The dimensions between them were sealed, the path closed perhaps forever. But Picard allowed himself to believe that somewhere, in some reality where gods were real and mythology lived, a father had kept his promise to his child. And that was enough. Back in Midgard, Kratos closed his eyes, sleep finally claiming him after days of exhaustion. His dreams were usually nightmares, visions of past atrocities, faces of those he'd killed, the screams of gods, dying by his hand. But tonight, for the first time in decades, Kratos dreamed of something different. He dreamed of the Enterprise sailing through stars, of Data asking questions about the nature of consciousness, of Worf's warrior respect, of Picard's idealistic belief that cooperation could triumph over conflict, of a universe that had chosen hope over despair, exploration over conquest, growth over stagnation. It was a naive dream, fragile, unlikely to survive contact with harsh reality. But it was beautiful. And when Kratos woke the next morning, Atreus already preparing breakfast over the fire, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Hope, not for himself. He was too far gone, too blood-stained, too broken to deserve such things. But for his son, for Midgard, for a future where strength served wisdom instead of tyranny, where power protected the weak rather than exploiting them, where the death of gods gave birth to something better. "Good morning, Father," Atreus said, smiling. "I was thinking, after we visit the dwarves, maybe we could check on some of the villages, see if they need help with anything. Not as gods commanding worship, but just neighbors helping neighbors." Kratos stood, rolling his shoulders, testing his fully healed leg. "Yes, we can do that." And in that simple agreement, to help without demanding tribute, to serve without requiring worship, to use strength in service of those weaker, the Ghost of Sparta took another step away from what he'd been and toward what he could become. The multiverse was infinite, full of possibilities and dangers, wonders and horrors. Two universes had briefly touched, exchanging a warrior for wisdom, strength for perspective, mythology for hope. Both were changed by the encounter. Both were better for it. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, the preservers monitored the sealed barriers, ensuring that the realms remained separate, stable, safe. They'd witnessed something extraordinary. A being of pure destructive capability, choosing restraint, choosing family, choosing to be more than what he'd been forged to be. Observation logged. The preservers recorded in their eternal archives. Entity Kratos demonstrates that even those defined by violence can choose differently. That mythology can evolve. That gods can die, but their killers can live with purpose beyond destruction. The multiverse is safer with such beings choosing wisdom over wrath. Dimensional stability, maintained. Probability of future incursion, minimal. Assessment. The Ghost of Sparta has found his peace. May it last. And in both universes, one of starships and federations, one of gods and mythology, life continued. Challenges would come, threats would emerge, conflicts would need resolution. But for now, in this moment, a father and son prepared to help their neighbors rebuild a world free from divine tyranny. And in the far reaches of space, a starship continued exploring, carrying with it the memory of a warrior who'd proven that even the strongest could choose mercy, that even god-killers could value life, that even those forged in violence could aspire to peace. The Ghost of Sparta had invaded Star Trek and left both universes better than he found them. The collision between mythology and technology, between ancient fury and futuristic idealism, had ended not in destruction, but in mutual understanding. Kratos returned to Midgard changed, not fundamentally, but subtly. He'd seen a civilization that chose cooperation over conquest, that valued life over power, that believed peace was worth fighting for, rather than something imposed through fear. The Federation would carry its own lessons forward. They'd encountered a being who operated outside their understanding of physics, who'd killed gods they thought were myths, who'd proven that sometimes strength without technology could triumph where advanced science failed. They'd learned that the universe was stranger, more dangerous, and more wondrous than their most ambitious theories suggested. Captain Picard would file reports that Starfleet analysts would debate for decades. Were Kratos' weapons evidence of sufficiently advanced technology indistinguishable from magic? Or were they actual mythology made manifest, proving that some realities operated on different fundamental principles? the debate would never be resolved. The sealed dimensions ensured no follow-up investigation was possible. But the impact was real. Both universes had been tested, challenged, and ultimately enriched by their brief connection. Kratos learned that strength could serve ideals instead of just survival. The Federation learned that some threats required warriors, not diplomats, and that acknowledging this wasn't abandoning their principles, it was protecting them. In Midgard, the Ghost of Sparta walked a path few thought possible. From god-killer to protector, from destroyer to builder, from monster to father. The journey was far from complete. Kratos would always carry the weight of his past, the blood on his hands, the ashes on his skin. But now he also carried something else. Proof that redemption was possible, that even beings forged in violence could choose differently, that the death of gods could give birth to something better than divine tyranny. The multiverse was infinite, its possibilities endless. Somewhere in that infinity, a father kept his promise to his son. Somewhere, a starship sailed between stars, exploring the unknown with hope instead of fear. Somewhere, reality remembered the moment when two universes touched and both emerged stronger. The Ghost of Sparta had invaded Star Trek, fought impossible battles, challenged civilizations, and returned home victorious. But his greatest victory wasn't the Romulan warbird crippled, the Klingons humbled, or the dimensional parasite defeated. It was keeping a promise to his son. And that made him more than a god-killer. It made him a father.